Good evening and welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting, January 14th, 2019. All members are present. This evening at 6 o'clock, we had an executive session for the purpose of discussing strategy with respect to litigation, as an open meeting may have detrimental effect on the position of the town in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3. And further, for the purpose of considering the purchase, exchange, lease, or other acquisition of real property at 333 Andover Street in accordance with Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A6. And would you all please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Seeing how this is the first meeting of 2019, I'd like to wish everyone a happy and healthy new year. And also would like to make mention that we unintentionally left off the agenda a section called public comments. I certainly, and none of us would certainly want to do that. So we'll take public comments under new business this evening, as new business permits us to do just that. Okay, for transmitting of Treasury warrants 24, 24A, 25, 25A, 26, 26A, 27, and 27A, I'm looking for a motion.
So moved.
Everybody. Okay, I'll pick Jonathan and for the motion, and seconded by Mr. Bendel. Any discussion? All in favor? And that's unanimous. Okay, we're going to get right to the appointments, but before I do that, I'm going to ask Selectman McCoy asked to say a few words on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate the courtesy of that. I would just like to say, for the record, not only will I recuse myself from this part of the agenda, I want the record to reflect that I'm going to leave the room. I would like Beverly, as the keeper of the minutes, to note that I'm going to leave at 7:05, and upon my return, after the 7 o'clock appointment's all done, I'd like the record to reflect my arrival back. So I'm just going to recuse myself, and I'm going to leave into the next room, into the manager's office. You still got a little candy left over to your chest? All right, good, thanks. All right, thank you.
Okay, and we're on to our first appointment at 7 o'clock, and that's with Bararam. Yes. And it's-
Take a seat at the table.
Why don't you have a seat over here? And this is an informational hearing relative to the management, ownership, and the directors at Michael's Place regarding alcoholic beverage license.
Yes, so let me just, by way of background, outline the circumstances here. So as part of the process that we go through every year, the administrative assistant notifies the owners of establishments that have all alcohol licenses of the upcoming license renewal. There was an initial notice that went out in early October advising the owners that the alcohol licenses, the applications would be coming up. Then there was a subsequent notice, that formal notice that went out in November that the applications were due. And then in this particular case, there was no response from these notices. So Beverly contacted the Michael's Place on the 29th of November just to inquire about the status of the application. Spoke with an employee who advised that individuals by the name of Jesse and Mike were the managers and were only in on Fridays, which raised some questions on our part. My understanding is that Mr. Ram came in the following day and spoke with Beverly. She asked about the status of management, and was informed that, by Mr. Ram, that he remains the manager, and when asked about Jesse and Michael, it indicated that they are partners. So I guess there's a number of questions that I would like to pose in terms of the process here. So the concerns are, first of all, that we want to make certain who the manager of the business is, and if there has been a change in ownership, that is something that is required to go through the Board of Selectmen and ultimately the ABCC before that can formally take place. So those are a couple of issues. And then the final issue has to do with one of the town's inhabitant bylaws, which was passed a few years ago, which requires for any certain licensees that they obtain fingerprinting through the police department so that background checks can take place. Again, there were, as part of the license renewal notice, that notice also included an indication that the applicants would need to go make arrangements with the police department to get the fingerprinting done. As of today, that has not taken place. So, Mr. Chair, with your authorization, I'd just like to ask some questions of the owner.
Sure.
Or proposed
By all
owner.
means.
So, first of all, if you could confirm, Mr. Ram, are you the 100% manager of the business here known as Michael's
Yes,
Place?
sir, yeah.
And what are the days and hours of operation of your establishment?
Or it's like every day I'm stay out there. Like sometime I go and Monday is I have off.
So the days at the business, days and hours that the business is actually open to the public, what are those?
It's like 11 to 9.
11 to 9 p.m. And is that Monday to Saturday or
Monday to Sunday, sir.
Monday to Sunday? Okay.
So every day.
Every day.
And what days and hours are you on the premises?
I mean every day, but no Monday.
Okay, every day except Monday. And are you 100% owner of the business, or
Yes, sir. Yes.
so there are no other
No.
partners?
No other partner.
And who is responsible for ordering the alcohol?
Me, sir.
And in terms of oversight of sale of alcohol to the patrons, who would be responsible for that? So as people purchasing alcohol in your business there, who's oversees that responsibility?
Just me, sir.
Okay.
So if someone comes to the front and orders
Yes, sir.
alcoholic beverage, they have to see you? They don't see the person who's at the cash register?
Yeah, cashier give it in the table.
Yeah, so there'll be, your employees
Employees, yes, sir. Yeah.
would
Some-
also have that authority to sell.
Yes. I check some ID first, and then I give you some in the table in drink. Sometimes I give, sometimes employees.
And who are Jesse and Mike?
No, just is my friend. Just like before I go 1 month in my country, and this time I give you over there. It's like you help me.
Okay, so they're both of them are just friends,
Yes.
and they don't have any interest, business interest in this.
No, sir.
And with respect to the fingerprinting, so notice went out on October 12th, November 21st, December 26th. What are your plans for making arrangements to get the fingerprinting squared away? That is a requirement by the inhabitant bylaws that all owners or managers with alcohol licenses are required to have the fingerprinting through the police department. I think that I would recommend to the board certainly that that in order for you to continue to operate with the license, that you need to contact the police department. I would recommend to the board within the next 7 days and make arrangements to get that squared away.
Just me, sir.
Is that, I mean, is that acceptable?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
It'd be just him.
Yes.
He's saying.
Just
Just
Yes.
you as the manager,
Yes.
not all the employees?
No, just me.
Okay, yeah. I didn't know if you were asking that as a question or not, that's why I'm saying.
Yeah, no.
You said just,
Just
okay,
me.
so just you.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Round? Okay. Okay, so with him coming up with these issues as being resolved in 7 days? Is that
Based
what you're
upon-
proposing?
Yes, yeah, based upon everything that's been presented here, it appears that Mr. Ram is the manager, he is the sole owner of the business, so there's no circumstances there that raise any concerns. So I think the expectation would be that within the next 7 days, subject to the board's direction, that you contact the police department. You should be looking to speak with Lieutenant Charles Fiore to schedule a time to, I think the first step is an application that you have to fill out, and then once that is complete, then he will make arrangements for you to come in for an appointment to just have the fingerprinting done.
Is he all set with the other paperwork that,
Beverly, are we all set otherwise?
I'm not sure about if he's taken action that was required by the building inspector and fire department for their inspection. I'm still waiting on that too.
Okay.
There's
so-
something with a vent.
All right, so there may be a couple of other issues that need to be addressed with the building inspector and fire department, so we will follow up with you on those items, but those are all tied into the ability to maintain the license in good standing. So we just want to, we just want to make sure everything, all the Ts are crossed and Is are dotted.
No, I have everything. This board inspector is like lessons I have.
right, and that's fine, that's why we asked Beverly, but there's just some issues that may have to take effect with inspections of the vent, or fire inspections you mentioned.
Yeah, it
Or-
was based on one of the new laws that was passed in 2003.
Yeah.
They have to be inspected by the building inspector and the fire department, and they have to sign off on it, and there's a problem with one of the vents, so.
So that's an issue that you'll have to address, and the fingerprinting. And you'll do that within 7 days, and then we'll be notified of the fact if you've completed that,
Yeah, I do.
okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
What if he's not completed in 7 days? What are the ramifications? What can we impose? Can we impose fines, or what will we do to, because it's been since October.
Well, technically, the fingerprinting needed to be done prior to the issuance of the license, so that
Right.
would have been in December. But if there's a failure to comply with these requirements, I believe there may need to be a more formal hearing. I would want to talk to council, but I think that would be the next step.
Okay, I think we're all set. Any other
Yes.
questions? Thank you. All right, so you'll follow up with that and get back to the town manager.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Ed, would you mind asking Mr. McCoy back? Okay, our 7:30 appointment, we're a bit early, it's about 7:20, is with Joshua Canfield on behalf of RFTP LLC, doing business as Sweet Pizza. Request for a common victualler license for the property located at 206 Ballardvale Street, Unit 4. Would Mr. Canfield be here? Okay, so his appointment is at 7:30, so he may be waiting for that time, so we can't move forward with that. And there was no indication of a phone call from him?
No.
Okay. The next couple of pretty sizable presentations, so if we start, then he'd come in, I could certainly do a song and dance routine or some
You may
jokes,
want
but
to just go
that wouldn't be
through
very good.
communications, some of the
Okay.
communications in the
Why don't
intro.
we start that? Okay, so we'll skip down to communications, and we'll wait for 7:30.
So first, under communications, is a memo that I sent to the Board of Selectmen as a follow-up to a request that was made to consider the prospect of looking to budget based upon raising the levy limit by 2% as opposed to the 2.5% that's authorized by Proposition 2.5. I did investigate that option, spoke with Karen Rashis, the principal assessor. You'll recall that when she was here in November to discuss the tax classification process, she noted that based upon the average value of homes in Wilmington, that the average tax bill, property tax bill, would increase by $290.74. If the town was to not raise property taxes to the levy limit, that differential, that 0.5% differential, equates to $416,874. When you break that down to the average property tax bill, the reduction and increase, and that's what it would be a reduction and increase, comes down to $33.13. So in that example, the average tax bill of $290.74 would go up by $257.661. And part of that is based upon the fact that the town has the maximum shift in property taxes, so the commercial, industrial taxpayers are paying a disproportionate share of the taxes. Next is a memo to the board just introducing the new assistant town manager, Carrie Coburn-Dion. She comes to us from Carlisle. She was the finance treasurer, actually the assistant treasurer and collector in Carlisle. She has a master's degree from Lowell, University of Mass at Lowell, master's degree in business administration, also a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration. She, prior to her time in both Carlisle and earlier Tingsboro, worked for Honeywell, where she advanced to the position of materials, director of materials for Honeywell. So she's certainly has a strong background in finance, and very excited to have her on board. You know, just from the first week that she's been here, I can tell you that she's got an incredible work ethic. She's spent a lot of extra hours already as we are in the midst of the budget process here. So I'm sure people around town will get to know her as time proceeds, and glad to have her.
We'd like to welcome her. She's here tonight. Kerry, thank you for being here this evening. And
Good luck.
welcome aboard and good luck, yeah.
Also, for the board's information is the calendar for the 2019 fiscal year town meeting schedule. Just some of the highlights. You'll note that the budget presentation is scheduled for February 4th. Town elections are April 27th. Town meeting May 4th. Deadline for petition articles is February 1st. The Board of Selectmen will be asked to sign the warrant on March 11th. The joint public hearing with the Planning Board and Finance Committee is March 19th. Also, as an FYI, there are meetings that will be taking place during the month of February with the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee meets on Tuesdays and Thursdays. You have a separate memo that identifies the dates and topics. I think there is going to be one change on that schedule, and that has to do with the rec. I believe there's a conflict that the Karen Campbell has on the 21st. So other than that, this is the schedule for Finance Committee meetings. Want to continue?
Yeah, as well.
Next is a memo to the Board of Selectmen with regard to economic development. The board has discussed the prospect of establishing an economic development committee. And this memo outlines what I would propose as an economic development committee, which is essentially would be a 7-member committee. One member from the Board of Selectmen, myself and the planning director, along with representatives from the business community and one member of the community at large. I think it's important when establishing a committee like this that it have a specific purpose. And so the items that I've outlined as issues that this committee should address is first of all to develop an understanding of to the greatest extent possible what economic development means to the residents of Wilmington. I think there are varying levels of support and understanding of what economic development means. So I think there needs to be a real self-assessment of what people are seeking. We also need to take a look at what our strengths are and our challenges are as a community in terms of promoting or pursuing economic development. This committee can be helpful in that respect. I also would look to this committee as a conduit to communicate with the Chamber of Commerce, engage the Chamber of Commerce, understand what their goals are, and how those connect with what we are looking to pursue. I think another opportunity exists here for this committee to develop a marketing tool, if you will, a brochure that talks about who Wilmington is as a community and why it makes sense to do business here. And then finally, as another area where this committee can have some impact, I think it can serve as an educational forum for both the committee members themselves as well as the public at large. I think there's opportunities to bring different speakers in, whether they be representatives from MAPC, some of the colleges and universities that have done work on economic development and the general business climate, different state agencies that support economic development, and other organizations, even the business community at large, inviting members of the various businesses to come in and talk about their circumstances and their goals. I would envision this committee as probably meeting on a monthly basis, with the possible exception of the summer months. As I indicated earlier during some of these conversations, we're limited in terms of staff support, so I would expect this committee would be a largely self-supporting committee where members would really need to be prepared to be engaged in everything from scheduling the meetings, taking minutes, setting the agendas. Certainly we would provide some support initially, but I think it would be in large measure a self-supporting group. And so those are the what I would envision as the components for this committee.
Okay, I know within this letter, it's seeking some feedback from the board members. I know that, I'm sure that many of you would be interested in speaking on this issue. I don't want to go much beyond now 7:30. Mr. Bendel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just thank the manager for this memo, and I know we're short on time, but I've just put it out there that I'd be willing to represent this board as a member of that committee if my colleagues see it fit to be.
Thank you for that. And this is going to happen. We're going to have this Economic Development Committee established and on the go very shortly.
So my question would be, I guess, what's the next steps to make this happen?
So the next steps would be for me to appoint the other members. I have not spoken specifically with individuals. I do have some folks in mind, but I would be looking to fill out the committee.
Okay, does this need a board approval, or is this just something that you as town manager can establish? And
I think it's, something that similar to the facilities master plan committee that can be established as a committee.
Any other
If
questions?
you're more comfortable with the vote, I'll be happy to make a motion.
Yeah, why don't we take a vote on establishing the committee? Let's put it formally on record.
Well, I'll move that we take up the recommendation from the manager to create an economic development committee for the community.
I'll second it.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Mendel, seconded by Mr. McCoy. Any discussion or further discussion on it? Okay, all in favor? That's unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, I'd
Thank
like
you.
to make a motion that we get Mr. Bendel as the selectman nominee, if that's needed in a motion. If it's needed in a motion, I will make that motion.
I don't think we really need
Okay.
that as a motion, if everybody's in
volunteered, so I was
agreement.
just gonna make sure he
just
sticks
Make sure
to
he
it.
gets, okay. Mr. Bendel, tag, you're it. All right, thank you. Okay, it's now 7:32. Is Mr. Canfield here? You are. Hey, why don't you come up front here? Joshua Canfield, on behalf of RFTP LLC, doing business as Sweet Pizza, request for a common victualler license for the property located at 206 Ballardville Street, Unit 4. Thank you
Thanks
for coming in.
Thank you. So it's pretty straightforward. This is the common victual license that allows for people who are attending the Sweet Pizza establishment to have their meals there. The recommendations from the health director, Shelley Newhouse, recommends approval of the application for the common victualer's license, as does the building inspector after review and consideration of the town of Wilmington bylaws and all applicable codes, I have no outstanding zoning issues with the above referenced business.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
Just, are you the new owner of the establishment?
Yes, I am.
How long have you owned it?
9 months.
Oh. Thank you.
No problem.
And it's good pizza. I mean, you want
Thank
to
you.
plug it, right?
Yeah.
It's
We're
sweet.
working on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sweet
there you
pizza.
go.
Beach style pizza.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, is there a motion
I'll make that
to
motion,
approve?
sir.
Mr.
Second.
Loud, seconded by Mr. Bendel. Any other discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous. Good luck.
Good luck.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, we have a 7:40 appointment. We're almost there, but Colleen O'Brien, General Manager of Reading Light Department, is here to give us an update, I think. Is she here?
Yes.
Is that- We're about 5 minutes early, so it's good that there's a little delay. Just checking. So each year, we get a report from the Reading Municipal Light Department, and Colleen is here with us this evening to provide us the report.
Yeah, thank you for having us. This year, I have with me our new Integrated Resources Director, Chuck Underhill. And he comes with a lot of experience, used to work for, well, I'll let you tell, go ahead.
I used to work for Colleen.
No.
I spent about 25 years in Vermont working for municipal electric systems through a joint action agency called the Vermont Public Power Supply Authority. And the last 10 years I've been working down here with public power systems in Massachusetts. And I was brought on board just over 2 months ago at RMLD to replace Jane, who has moved on, taken a senior management position in another municipality in Massachusetts. So I'm getting my feet wet.
Yeah, Jane has become the GM in Holden, Mass. So we're glad Chuck was able to hit the ground running. Anyways, this is our FY 2018, which is a report that we typically do for the town of Reading, who is our host town. That's why it says FY 2018. We're reporting on everything that we completed in FY 2018, and then give you a kind of a brief overview of what we have planned coming up. The first thing I'd love to explain is this beautiful picture, which was actually done by Jesse Ding from Wilmington High School, and it's entitled Community Power, and it was the winner for this year's cover. And about 2 years ago, we added, along with the third grade education program, to have the seniors or the juniors come in and do some artwork on conservation and electrification and different things. And they come in during the summer on their own time, and they sit and they get trained with everything and all about electricity and the utility life. And then they draw us these amazing, and they all, we judge them all, and some of them get gift certificates to art supply stores. So we're very proud to tell you that the first place winner came from Wilmington. Okay, let's see how this works. The next winner was Megan Coram from Reading Memorial High School. Very avatar there. Growing a sustainable future. The next one was from North Reading High School, Laura Buscemi, the Foundation of Conservation. And there was so many amazing artwork that we couldn't do first, second, third, and fourth. We got the winner of the cover of the annual report. But as you can see at the top, this one was the Community Inspiration Award, the last one with the Environmental Inspiration Award. The next one, I gave him the Clever Award. This is Nikola Tesla Shaves the Peak. I don't know if you can see him shaving his mustache there from Juliana Corner from North Reading High School. Harmonious Relationship for the Holistic Award from St. John's Prep, grade 9. Sue Sean lives in Reading. And then the winner. So first I'll go over some of the highlights. One of the biggest news that we have is that we've switched from fiscal year to calendar year. And it brought about much efficiency because all of the municipal light departments in the state of Massachusetts have to report to the Department of Public Utilities on a calendar year basis. And so last year we actually did 2 audits. One was to end the fiscal year, and then one to start the calendar year. So as of calendar year 19, we're now in a calendar year budget. Both audits that were done last year were clean with no management letter, so that'll be 5 in a row since I've gotten there. Hopefully keep our fingers crossed. So that was very successful. All of the financials came in strong, and we've made a lot of improvements to our communications with the town of Reading as they handle our cash, and the auditor was quite impressed. So that's a big change. It will also help with any type of rate increase. So we had a little bump, like a 3% last year that took us in the fiscal year, but now for this calendar year, there's no increase at all. So that's good news. But being in a calendar year should help all of the towns, because when we do our analysis now, it'll be towards the end of the year in preparation of a calendar year budget, which means anything that's a change to the towns we'll be able to present at the beginning of the year, so it can segue into your budget process, instead of us both trying to do our analysis and you get your budgets done at the same time. Has been quite hectic. So anyways, we're excited about that. It saves money, it helps with efficiency, so it's a big change for us. We continued our strategic planning and developing our long-term roadmaps for each of the divisions within the department. Just recently, we had the chairman of the select board in North Reading, Mr. Prisco, came and actually facilitated our department strategic plan for all of the senior managers, and that was it's phase 1. We have another meeting coming up, but hopefully we'll have an updated strategic plan here within the next month or 2. We received a $1 million grant awarded by the state of Massachusetts for a 5-megawatt energy storage unit that's going to be installed in North Reading, and that will help to shred the peak. That's a collaboration project with NextEra Energy. So actually, the grant money we got is not paying for the battery. It's being sited in North Reading. The $1 million is split over 3 years, and it offsets the cost of the price of electricity to all of our customers, is how that money's being used. And the state of Massachusetts is very excited. This was the largest, it's actually the largest battery storage system in the state thus far. Taunton Municipal, they bought theirs, so the state is getting a lot of information and all of these grants that they gave out this past year about how these new technologies will work. So we'll give you an update the next time I come back. It should be built before next summer. We're hoping in the spring it'll be up and running, or at least we'll be able to test it at that point. Recently, we installed an outage management system to improve operating efficiency and facilitate customer communication. What that means is we've had a 10-year technology plan where the control room just used to answer the phone and take the information. He would radio the nightman or whoever that would respond to any type of outages or trouble. And now what we've done is there was not so smart meters that were out there. And so what I did when I came is we stopped putting in those meters. We bought smart meters and we built a mesh network that now flexes over a fixed network. So it kind of helps the not so smart meters communicate with the smart network system. And with that, we're able to collect that data into our new control room now, where it can analyze and say, okay, this section is out, would automatically send out the crews, give an estimated time of restoration. In the interim, I had been using Twitter to try to send out information about outage areas. This will now be very similar to National Grid or Eversource, where in the very near future, within the next month or two, you'll be able to sign up with whether you want a text, email, or a phone call, similar to like when schools are out, and it'll say your area is in an outage. This is the estimated time of restoration. If you wanted to go on a computer on our brand new website, you'd be able to see a map that will show a polygon of the area that's out. And it doesn't drill down to individual homes or anything like that. That would be considered a safety issue. It's more of polygon issues if you're familiar with some of the investor-owned utilities and how they communicate with their customers. So the campaign to ask everyone, do you want a text, do you want a phone call, that should be out in the next month or so. We're actually working with this company called Centurion in order to create that adapter that connects to our between our outage management system and the billing software that has everyone's information. So that's pretty exciting. It won't quite be done for this year's storms. Hopefully we won't get any storms, but it'll definitely be up and running by next year. So that's another big win for us. That's the integrated voice recognition system, response system that is up there. Continuing on with some highlights, we have a brand new, I'm going to flip to the next one so you can see it. I don't know if anyone's familiar with our old archaic chisel on a rock website that we had, but now we have these cool little dots that icons that you can click on. It's very user-friendly. Right there on the top right is the Twitter feed, but after we get this outage management system and IVR system up and running, you'll see the map with the polygons if there's an outage and restoration times. And but take a look at it. It's very easy for looking where our rebates are, everything that's going on. If you're looking for any of the minutes, or all very user-friendly. So another big change for this past year. We added a 100% electric Chevy Bolt. We had a Prius, and so instead of going for a combination hybrid, we went for a plug-in. We also, this past summer, launched a pilot that lasted, I think, about 10 weeks, where we gave between $1,000 and $1,500 for a take delivery of electric vehicle plus a home charger. And I think everyone at work tried to tell me it wasn't going to go well, but we ended up taking 52 deliveries, right?
I believe so.
And I think they had guessed about 15. So very excited about that, and We're right now in the process of evaluating, under Chuck's direction, our new electric vehicle program that we're going to roll out. So when that gets done, of how we're going to implement that into commercial customers, into parking lots, or into condominium associations. I mean, right now, we have rebates for residents in order to get the chargers, but how do we implement those at the condos and at the commercial properties? The system that we use is called ChargePoint, and under the app system, if you had an electric vehicle, you could look and see where there was a charging station on that app. And so we're part of that, that app. And right now we have 6, I believe, in analog, and they want, at the end of the day, probably another dozen or so. And we have a couple at the RMLD. So right now, Chuck's group, they're looking at where we might place them. They're kind of expensive, and the cost benefit, you know, has to be there. I was talking to Jeff earlier, you know, there's parking ticket issues where some people will park in the spot and then leave their car there. You know, when you get the text that says your car is fully charged, you need to move it, and so someone else can use it. So there's those type of logistics that we have to work out with the ChargePoint company and how that would work. So when we get that program up and running, I think Chuck and Joyce Mulvaney, our communications manager, is probably going to come out and ask if we could have a little bit more of your time, the board, to make that presentation for everyone. We continue to make significant reliability improvements. I talked about the meter mesh network program, the new substation in Wilmington. So we kind of band-aided the existing substation for now. It'll last, you know, several years, we think, but it's at the end of its useful life, and Hamid did a great job with getting it to a point where we think it'll last for a bit, while we continue to work with a couple of different places for the land. We were at the level of a letter of intent for a property on Ballardvale Street. We like that one. The only issue with that one is it's a small lot. The only way to egress the lot is underground, which is a lot more money, like about $2 million more. So we have another property on 125 that we're looking at that's much larger, that we can egress overhead in order to get the feeders out. And we're working with that owner as well on a letter of intent. So we're hoping construction for the substation is 2021. So we're still on time, but I'd like to get this land deal wrapped up before the summertime. Is there any questions on the substation? No? Okay. Great. We continue to implement our reorganization. We have a number of vacancies right now. If you know people that are looking for jobs that may be in the utility industry or something related to that, maybe within the next couple of weeks they'll be on our website if you want to check those out. We have power supply analysts, HR is getting ready to retire. What else do we have? We have meter tech. We have a few of them. A what? Purchasing, assistant purchasing manager. So as we fill these positions and get the succession planning back up and running, you know, take a look at the websites if anybody is think that they might be interested or qualified in those type of positions. Okay, we looked at that beautiful website. I love it. Okay, shred the peak. So as everyone must know by now, peak demand or peak electricity occurs when New England is using the most electricity, and it's usually June, July, or August. We actually have had a peak in June, and that was not last year, but the year before. Just before we got the generator up and running. I think we got it up and running in July, but the peak was actually in June. But during that time frame is when you have the least efficient and more polluting generating stations running, because the ISO New England is the New England grid operator has to stack all of the generators, and the ones that come on the last are usually the most polluting and the most expensive. So if we can carve off that peak at the top, as you can see the skateboarders are shredding the peak. it saves everyone money. We take whatever peak we can shred from the 5 megawatt gas generator that we installed 2 years ago, and then we'll be taking the 5 megawatt battery storage that we have, and that'll be next year. Cumulatively, we have a lot of customers that are signed up for the program, and cumulatively, we have a lot of commercial, but we're always looking for more people to sign up between the hours of 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. And right now on Twitter, and we'll use that IVR system to send out notices as well, that'll say tomorrow will be a peak day. And we actually have a transmission peak every month, and then we have one annual capacity peak that's once in the year. But you might get 6 or 7 notifications, because as the hot days come up, you might think that that's it. But then it could be another hot day, but you're not sure. So that's why we call them on the we tweet them out. So on the Shred the Peak efforts, we also have 2 community solar arrays in Wilmington at 2.7 megawatts with an approximate savings of $30,000. The 2.5 natural gas one that I just spoke of are about annual savings of about $380,000. And the 5 megawatt plant battery storage, which is would have a net lease payment savings of $140,000. When I talked about the commercials being part of the program, we have 15 large commercials. They didn't make the peak this past year, but if they had, it would have been a savings of about $318,000, and that's actually some of the savings is shared back with the commercial customers, and 800 residential customers shed about a half a megawatt of monthly in an annual savings of $36,000. Suggestions on shredding the peak for residential: reducing air conditioning and heating, deferring appliance usage, water heating, and commercial, adjusting the HVAC, reducing high load processes, and water heating and cooling. And in Chuck's group, we have mechanical engineers that actually come in and they'll do commercial audits, and they'll help with what customers can do, not only sign up for the program, but also what can they do to improve their processes or reduce the high load during the peak demand.
Excuse me, do you ask the commercial customers to run their generators? Their standby generators?
We do if they have one that.
Do you have a lot that do that, or?
It depends. Do we have a count of how many there are?
That I don't know.
Yeah, I'll have to get you the number.
When I was working in Milford, we were one
Yeah.
of those customers that was
Right.
asked to run our generator.
We have a program that if they run their generator, they can receive
Yeah.
benefits back. We're not the only game in town, though. It's one of those little caveats in the Massachusetts law that allows companies, other types of companies that go in and offer programs to them as well.
I was just curious.
Yeah, so we give a benefit to some of them for turning them on, and then, like, I don't want to say names, but other companies can also do peak
Okay.
shredding and share the benefits with the customers as well.
Thank you.
But I will tell you that the Reading Light gives the best benefit.
Another question.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Hi.
You mentioned it, so I just want to chime in
Yeah.
if I can, but does Reading Light offer audits, like Mass Save will come into your house and let you know, but can you talk to that? I know you mentioned for the commercial side, but what about like a resident wants to have their home evaluated?
We offer residential audits. Those are performed by a consulting group through Energy New England. And all you have to do is call our customer service department. They will set the customer up with the contact for that audit. And we do have the commercial audits available as well.
Is there a cost for the resident for that?
There is no cost.
So no cost. And so if they wanted to have that done at their home, they would just simply call.
Let me rephrase that. It's included in the rates. There's no out-of-pocket expense.
We like that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and, last year I spoke about the new service requirements handbook, and it's a pretty comprehensive A to Z for dealing with, the RMLD, but anything that electrician would look for, a developer, a resident, commercial, it's all there, and you could do, find any keyword, it's on the website. But every year, Chuck and his group do an analysis of new rebates. Do you know what I mean? So there's always something new that's there, and it gets updated every year. And if there's anything that people feel like we should look at and do an analysis of rebating, I mean, we offer heat pumps, I mean, lots of different things.
I'm sorry if I jumped ahead, but I just think it's important that we mention that for folks at
Oh,
home.
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. So on the customer efficiency programs, all these rebates that I mentioned, appliances, HVAC, water heating, no-cost home energy assessment, online store for rebated energy efficiency products. You know, if you're going to be going to the hardware store and it's electric, you should check the rebate in the online store first. You might be surprised some of the stuff that we're carrying. Plug-in electric vehicle charger is something new that we just added this past summer. Commercial, as Chuck said, we do the audits over there, lighting retrofits. I know that George is taking great advantage of all the rebate programs for the town of Wilmington, and has saved you guys a lot of money. Great job, George. Chillers, compressors, waste heat recovery systems, renewable energy rebates, plug-in electric vehicle charger rebates for any commercials that are looking to put something in their parking lot. Just so you know, for the commercial chargers, so if you have a company that wants to put a charger in and they want to give their employees free electricity, like let's say it's for company electric cars or something like that, that's something that can go through the commercial's properties meter. But if it's not, then it has to be a meter separate by RMLD, meaning that municipal utilities are not allowed to do sale for resale. So we can't sell electricity to a company and then they turn around and sell that electricity to their employees, say. So if it's part of your benefit package, then it goes through the customer's meter. If it's not, then it's an RMLD meter on, even though it's on the customer's property. That make sense? Just so we're clear. Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm getting to that one. Let's see, economic development revenue generating activity. These are just, I don't know why the whole list isn't there. Oh. Sorry, get ahead of myself. Okay, so this is just one of our strategic objectives for, we want to attract new customers and retain existing customers, which provides increased load generating revenue. So the next list is, so when Osram Sylvania came to Wilmington, we came in and you know, through the invitation of the town of Wilmington, we talked about all of these benefits of receiving electric service from a municipal. I don't live in a municipal. I wish I did. My bill's about, for 700 kilowatt hours, my bill is about $180, $200, and it's closer to around 100 here, 110. So it's a significant difference between a municipal bill and an investor-owned utility bill. So there's a lot of incentives of people moving here and also businesses, but as I've told Jeff, I mean, it's never the intention of RMLD to step on any town's economic development toes. I just want you to know the benefits of having a municipal, and if you'd like to use them, we're glad to come in and do a presentation like we've done in the past. We're moving along on our 10 new proactive cyclic maintenance programs, including pole inspection, replacements, manhole inspections, transformers, porcelain cutouts. They inspect all of the distribution feeders, as well as the services and secondaries. We infrared all of the parks and substations. We do all of the substation equipment testing and maintenance now in-house. We have a new division called Tech Services. And we do all the tree trimming and vegetation through Mayor, but we have an amazing tree trimming plan that's directional cutting to the aesthetics and health of the tree, and I think so far it's going really well, and we've had a significant decrease in outages due to trees, which is usually your number one cause of outages because of the new tree trimming program. The LED streetlight program, as you know, we got a grant for $250,000, of which 125 went towards each of the town's streetlights, split amongst the 4 towns, and then the other 125 went to commercial lighting rebates, LED lighting rebates. So the 3-year program that started in FY16 is now complete. So we have a handful of floodlights left that are on private property that we're getting to, we're ticking them off the list. But as far as the streetlight program, and I have to say, for 3 years, not one complaint about the streetlights. I think we moved ahead to refocus it a little bit. Other than that, all the customers seem to be happy with them. There's a reduction in savings. I think the police and security like them because of the lighting. So it was a good program. We're glad that we got that grant. Next, we have the double poles. Double poles is called a snapshot for a couple of reasons. We're constantly upgrading the system now because we have a pretty intensive capital improvement plan. So I may take 10 or 15 poles down, but I might be putting up 30 poles for a new circuit. So they come and they go. Over time, though, they should be starting to come out. Wilmington is a Verizon custodial area, and what that means is every pole that's in all 4 of the towns is owned by half Verizon, half RMLD. That's the ownership interest. Then the service territory is split in half for custodial, and what the custodial means is either Verizon or RMLD will put in the second pole, wait for the transfers for each of the attachers, and then that same custodial will take the pole butt out, okay? So for Wilmington, the snapshot has 28 RMLD transfers, 1 pole butt pole. Wilmington Fire, 39 transfers. The non-participating attachee, I believe, was a company. When I talked to Kathleen today, it's a particular company, and they've been transferred. Verizon transferred 12 poles 2. Light towers are fiber loop, and then Comcast. And I duly noted the ones on Shawshene that you mentioned this morning, Jeff, and I'll get back to you on that. And lastly, the strategic vision recap. As I mentioned to you, we met this past week on updating our strategic plan. We want to continue our economic developments, especially with this electrification of helping customers change from burning fossil fuels over to electric, and then eventually having that electric supplied by renewables, which is basically what the definition of electrification is. The Mass Department of Transportation says that, transportation, meaning buses and trains and things like that, are your ‑1 user of what's creating the carbon issue. That's one of the largest. If you start thinking about it, you're like, oh, that makes sense. So, the Department of Transportation is trying to do their long-term planning. They were talking at the most recent meeting I went to that they had this black box, and they would put in a question, and it would do this, these algorithms, and then it would spit out an answer. And the question that got put in is the red line, and what got spit out was, we don't know. That's what the box said, because there are so many different things to consider now. When if the state takes 40 years to try to redesign and redevelop and purchase a new red line train system, what is going to happen in those years? Are people going to start using self-driving cars? Are we going to electrify everything? So there's a lot of changes that are going in that type of thing. And I mean, just like your kid's laptop, it's like, oh, well, this one's going to have more memory, and you wait and you wait. But at the end of the day, your kid still needs a laptop for college and you still have to buy one. So the RMLD realizes that, we have to, spend our money, prudently. We do cost benefits on everything, but we have to move ahead with technology. So with the electric vehicles that we see as one of the areas where we can offset some of these loss of kilowatt hour sales that we're seeing, about 1.5% this last year, mostly due to conservation efforts, which is great, but we want to be able to recover that. We're hoping to help recover it with the electric vehicles. And we watch for the state and see what they're doing and what others are doing to try to bring those numbers back up for the revenue, because we would rather have the sales go up instead of raising rates, in order to be able to pay for the cost of production. So, any questions on that? Nope. Okay, go fast. I think I hit everything.
Great. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Do any colleagues have any questions, Mr. Bennett? Comments?
Thank you very much. Thank you, folks, for the presentation. Just a couple quick questions, if I may.
Sure.
Just want to make sure we have this clear for folks at home. I appreciate that we're talking about shredding the peak and the warm weather, but unfortunately, we all know that we're going to get some snow and folks will be without power. So if they are without power this year, the ways that they can find out about when the power is going to be back on. You mentioned Twitter, so if somebody doesn't have Twitter, I notice it's on their website, but
Right.
that would be under the assumption that they had power to get onto the internet. So
Right.
could you just talk to me about some other ways that folks can be
Well,
prepared for that?
Yeah, you can get Twitter alerts on your cell phone, which,
Okay.
it will say right on there the area that's out, the estimated time of restoration. If there's no estimated time of restoration, it could be that there's a massive tree down, so they're evaluating whether or not they maybe need to go get a crane to come in. So when it's estimated time of restoration question mark, it means they're out there, they're evaluating it. As soon as the crews do have an estimate, they'll repost it on Twitter. But our control room still takes phone calls. You can still call in as we get this new outage management system up and running. I mean, eventually, we'll know you're out of power the same time you know you're out of power.
Sure.
So it'll be important. And what's good about the system that we're putting in is, let's say there's an area that's out, but let's say you have something additional wrong with your house that's above and beyond what's part of this area outage. Once that area outage is fixed, if you're still out of power, we're still going to know, because that meter is still going to be communicating to the outage management system saying, I'm still out. So you won't get rolled up into that area outage. You know what I mean? So, and this IVR system should be able to send out a notice saying, you specifically are still out. You know what I mean? That's coming to your phone or your email, or however it is you'd like to be communicated. So it's the same as last year. I think if you're not on Twitter, I think it's a good idea. I think it's very helpful. But you can always still call in, and we'll come out and make another presentation when we get the IVR up and running, because I think that might require maybe 10 minutes of training so that everybody's on board.
Okay, thank you. The next question I had is the tree trimming.
Yes.
So I just want to be clear on that. That's kind of a proactive thing that you guys do in advance of a storm. So it's much different than, say, tree clearing after a storm,
Yeah.
right? Or you guys don't do any of that, right?
No, we're not. We have a vegetation management plan with your town and your tree warden that we submit, and the entire service area, Linfield, North Reading, and Wilmington, is on a 5-year cyclic trim, okay? So they do the main feeders and then they do the laterals, and it just keeps going. And we trim to 8 feet, and that, different species grow at different, but the 8 feet seems to keep the majority of it. I mean, we've had a little bit of a problem in the last couple of years with all the rain that we've had. It washes away, it erodes the soil, and a lot of trees are falling over. In that particular case, tree trimming is not really helping. That's when we have to get the cranes in there and lift them up off of the lines, and unfortunately we've had quite a few of those in the service territory. Feels like it's been raining for 2 years, so That's kind of the tree trimming program.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
it's cyclic, it goes on and on and on, unless there's an outage, and then the crews will specifically go to that area.
I appreciate that. I know if it's anything like last year, DPW did an awesome job. They had cleared somewhere in the order of hundreds of trees from the roads, and it certainly took
Yeah,
a lot of time, but they
lot.
did obviously a great job. So we're happy to get any help in that
Yeah.
department if we can. And just lastly, I'm not sure when you entered the room, but we are putting together an economic development committee, and we would be wondering if you maybe perhaps would come before that group once it's formed in the future and maybe give a presentation like this or meet with the group about utilities in town.
Absolutely. Actually,
great.
Chuck is in charge of that group. One of his employees, Tom O'Lilla, is actually on the economic development team for North Reading. So, however, in whatever format you'd like us to participate or present, we're willing to do whatever. And
That'd be great.
we can give Chuck a call and set up whatever you need.
Great. Thanks
okay?
very much.
We're glad to help.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just make a couple of quick comments. I mean, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I really think customer service does an outstanding job at Reading Light, especially the men and women on the front lines when they're in the bucket trucks. Very seldom do we lose power, but when we do, they really get it together and they really get that turned on. And it's really comforting to know that. And I've said it before, and it means a lot, because when you see the bucket trucks out there and they're out there working, obviously we're trying to be comfortable at home, and it's below zero out there freezing, and it's a tough job. And real quick, relative to the streetlight program you had for 3 years, I could honestly say, when I first saw those LEDs come up on my street, Treasure Hill Road, I said, I hated them. And some of my neighbors said, I can't believe it. We're losing a lot of, power, for example, like lighting. The other old bulbs, I thought it did a great job. But as you get used to it and you see it, you kind of say, the LEDs did work out pretty good, and I think it was good. So I just have to honestly say that, because I did talk to my neighbors, and they thought overall the LED was a good way to go. And I'm just curious. If everyone says, when I want to buy a car, do I want to lease a car, do I want to buy one, or do I want to buy one used? Now, you talk about the plug-in electrical vehicle charger. You must have it down to a science. Can you give us an example of a vehicle, if they plug it in at their home, are they really truly saving money buying an electric car over a period? It's going to take a long time. For example, when somebody goes like so many miles to the gallon buying gas, you have to have it down to a science. Or maybe not. When they plug it in, what's it cost the person to plug in that vehicle at their home in comparison to miles per gallon?
We charge 22 cents a kilowatt hour for, to plug it in, and it equates to, I think, about $1.35. It's around $1.
$1.15 to
Dollar, yeah,
$1.20 a
$1.20, between $1.15, about $1.50. If it was a gallon of gas.
Oh, so you broke it down to $1.15.
But if you're trying to do a cost-benefit analysis of, okay, if the electric car costs more than this other car, I mean, you have to do the whole analysis in order it, and, at the end of the day, you're saving the planet, so you have to put that value in there. So, it's a give and take, I think, for those, for those type of purchases. They've come a long way with the range. There used to be a lot of range anxiety, oh my God, I'm going to be out of power. I had this one lady, she was in Boston, she had a BMW, and they have like creature comforts that you could start shutting off, you know what I mean? Like, you get rid of comfort A, comfort B, you just base it down to a box at the end, which I thought was pretty funny. But I mean, they're coming a long way. We've run, I think, 5 or 6 drive cars, including at our open house in October, where we have 6 or 7 dealers come with their cars, and you can ask them all kinds of questions. I'll let you know when the next one is. You should go check it out. You can ask them all those types of questions, because I think they're up to about 300 miles now
Really?
before.
I appreciate the
they're
time,
out.
and I'll just say, I love my 2001 Chevy Suburban. I still have it, 135,000 miles. I don't think I'll be buying an electric car. Besides, take a look at me, I like a big vehicle, Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody else?
Just quickly, should residents anticipate any rate increases?
No rate increase for the rest of calendar year 19. So we'll do the analysis in September, And if there's going to be any adjustment, we'll let you know at the first of the year so it can segue into your budget.
Thank you.
So, but nothing, we had a 3% last year.
I'm aware.
Okay.
I just want to say thank you for being here tonight. Great presentation.
Oh, great.
Big fan of RMLD. They've done a great job. I've been in town for 30-plus years and really no issues with RMLD, so thank you for being here and a great presentation.
All right, well, let us
Thank
know
you.
about the economic development or anything else you need, okay?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Okay, that brings us to our 8:15 appointment. It's about 8:18 right now. That would be with Valerie Gingrich, Director of Planning and Conservation for the town of Wilmington, and Branner Stewart with the UMass Donahue Institute to present to us the market study analysis. Yeah.
And with that PowerPoint. Good to go?
Good evening.
Good evening.
As you all know, this summer we contracted with UMass Donahue Institute to work on a study focused on Main Street, specifically the piece of the corridor that is around the shopping plazas, so from Clark Street to Richmond Street. And tonight we have Branner Stewart with us. He's the Senior Research Manager at the Donahue Institute, and he's going to present his work. So I'll just let him do that.
All right, well, as an introduction to the UMass Donahue Institute, I work in downtown Boston at 1 Beacon Street, and we're part of the UMass President's Office. We're not affiliated directly with any one of the individual 5 campuses of the system. We are with the President's Office. So, so the impetus of the study was that there was a kind of a recognition that the Route 38 Main Street corridor was not necessarily providing the retail options that Wilmington residents were looking for, and also to look at, there's been a number of closures, including Sonic and Walgreens and Chili's, I'm not sure if it's over the past year or so, and why these types of places are closing. So we did kind of a basic like market study analysis of the types of places or retail or restaurants that would have a fit in Wilmington, and more specifically within this corridor. So part of my presentation will be going more deeply into the socioeconomic structure of Wilmington and what that means and how that pertains to retail opportunity here. And we'll segue from that into doing a retail gap analysis, which looks at the supply of retail in Wilmington as well as the demand. And it's looking at how Wilmington residents are spending their money and what part they're spending in Wilmington and which parts they're spending elsewhere. And lastly, I'll go more specifically into some of the retail and restaurant challenges that the town faces, as well as the opportunities for bringing in a kind of a broader range of retail and restaurants into the community. So this is our focus area, which Valerie described, between Richmond Street and Clark Street. Right now, it's kind of a 60s or 70s style urban development that emphasizes parking heavily. That's on the street side, on the Main Street side, with the retail further set back. And we delve kind of fairly deeply into the socioeconomic context, because if you're talking to prospective retailers or restaurants, ultimately they're looking at areas that present expansion opportunities or niches where they can see that they would be able to, capitalize on that particular market and earn some revenue, as well as obviously profit. So I'll describe the population of the town and the context of the population growth in the region in Massachusetts, and also look at the economic structure of Wilmington and some of the basic factors that retailers and restaurants look into when they're considering locations for retail. I want to start off by saying that this is really, in terms of the post-recession period, I'm talking post-2010, this has been, Wilmington, at least right now, pending if we go into another sort of a recession, Massachusetts is doing very well demographically and economically. This first slide shows Wilmington, it's in red, compared to the United States on the left and Massachusetts in blue on the right, and population growth 2010 to 2017. So Massachusetts is the fastest growing state in the entire Northeast right now, and Wilmington growing basically around the national level, and Wilmington, at least 2010 to 2017, was growing population-wise faster than the fastest growing state in the Northeast. And so that's the type of expansion information that retailers would be looking into. They want to be in a growth market. And not only is Wilmington growing itself, but it is part of a region that is growing. We compared Wilmington to a group of similar benchmark towns that are between 128 and 495 that are nearby. And overall, the region is actually growing even slightly faster than Wilmington. So this is definitely a growth region. So the draw for retail and restaurants would not just be in the town itself, but it's kind of a region-wide phenomenon, which is positive. Now, looking at the age structure of Wilmington, and age is an important thing too, because different age groups buy and need different things. And the two components of Wilmington that I've found the most striking is that it has a fairly large young population on one end, meaning that there would be a market for child-related goods, sports goods, and then it also has a fairly disproportionate share of people who I'd consider more of the mature working age, which is 40 to 64, and that group would be more likely to be consuming in healthcare, entertainment, and dining. Now moving to, I've just been describing some population trends, and now I'm shifting a little bit more to the jobs trends. And just as in population, Massachusetts is the fastest growing state, also in the Northeast, in terms of jobs growth. And sometimes we're a top 10 state in net change of jobs over like any annual periods since 2010. So it is quite a growth market here in terms of jobs. And Wilmington has shown pretty fast growth from 2010 to 2017. And you'll see that this actually kind of represents a recovery from quite a loss between 2001 and 2010. And 2001 was kind of an interesting period because Wilmington, that was kind of the, that was like the highest year of employment historically for quite a while, and it's just about regained that. In 2001, Wilmington was benefiting from the surge in kind of communications related manufacturing, and that has since come down a bit, but then it's being compensated by some other sectors of the economy, which I'll show you in a second. And as Wilmington is a fast-growing town demographically within a fast-growing region, it's also a relatively fast-growing town right now. within a fast-growing region too, because both the Wilmington as well as the surrounding area are also growing faster in jobs than Massachusetts or the United States as a whole right now. And when you say that, like, in Massachusetts and the Boston area, this is recognized as one of the most dynamic areas economically in the country, as well as even globally, and obviously Wilmington is part of that. And my parents live in Connecticut. I went down there last weekend, and there's a marked difference in just the feel of driving around suburban New Haven, versus, driving around like suburban Boston, including Wilmington. Traffic levels, just retail activity, how much you see in the parking lots. So again, jobs growth is a positive for retail. This slide here shows that Wilmington has a very high net inflow of workers on a daily basis. And so these workers are spending their money. They're spending their money on lunch. They're spending money on goods that they need on their way home. So again, this large net flow of workers into the town also represents an opportunity for Wilmington's retail as well as for restaurants. In terms of the sectoral growth, manufacturing, as I mentioned before, we've seen a slight decline, but we are like the number one. Massachusetts is the number one state in terms of tech manufacturing or concentration of tech manufacturing, and that's one of the things that Wilmington has with its analog devices, as well as their headquarters office, but others as well in the electronics and communications industries, and also part of the technology side. Professional technical services, which is part of tech, has also seen fairly substantial growth of in the past 7 or 8 years. And that's important because it really shows that Wilmington is part of the Massachusetts tech dynamic, which is kind of a world leading industry, and is also something that I would profess to both restaurants as well as to retailers. But that said, Wilmington's growth in retail, since even though it's had fairly substantial growth in jobs overall, retail jobs have remained fairly flat. And you can see the red line that's close to the bottom. That's Wilmington's retail jobs, and it's not really grown substantially. And interestingly, the share of all jobs in Wilmington that are in retail is 5.9%. In Massachusetts, the share of all jobs that are in retail is 10%. So that basically shows that that the retail market is underserved potentially, and that there would be opportunity to find growth and growth niches within the town. Consistent with what I was just describing for the retail employment, Wilmington also has a very low concentration of jobs that are in eating and drinking establishments. In 2017, 4.3% of all Wilmington jobs were in eating and drinking establishments, and that compares to 6.4% for Middlesex County, and then 7.7% for the state. So again, it kind of underscores that there's a likely underserved market in Wilmington, which would also be kind of at least make some people maybe interested in potentially looking at this town maybe a little bit more as a place that where they could expand or develop a new restaurant or retail establishment.
I know you're comparing Wilmington to Middlesex County, but Wilmington is in Middlesex County as well.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
so it's a part of it.
Yeah.
But so Wilmington, even as part of Middlesex, has Middlesex County overall is quite like 1/3 higher concentration of jobs in eating and drinking establishments than the town itself does. And yeah, the low concentration in eating and drinking establishments might also be a slight lost opportunity for the town in terms of revenue. This compares Wilmington with our benchmark towns in terms of meals tax revenue. Meals tax revenue, it's a local option tax of where the town can get 0.75% of the meal revenue. And Wilmington's is just under, in 2016 was just under $400,000, which was kind of in line a bit with some of the benchmark towns, but way before the more kind of suburban concentrated retail that you see in Burlington. So again, that's an opportunity. Go into a couple more characteristics. Household income and education attainment levels are relatively high in Wilmington, especially when you look at the Massachusetts average and look at the United States. What this translates into in terms of retail preference, the more highly educated as well as the more affluent tend to seek out convenience, saving time, experiential retail, experiential restaurants like cafes, bakeries, upscale restaurants, brew pubs. And Wilmington also has a very, very high share of its households are owner occupied, which connotes would connote kind of a solid or relatively stable market in this area, as probably a little bit less turnover than you would have with places that have higher levels of rental households. So this as I said at the very beginning, we've just kind of divided into three parts. The first part was the demographics and the economics. The second part here is we looked at the retail gap in Wilmington, and as I said at the beginning, this is the supply of retail, versus the endemic demand that's within the town, and what is satisfied locally, but local retailers, and then the dollar value that leaves Wilmington that is spent elsewhere. And we get this data through Esri, business analysts, which is kind of a commonly used tool by economic developers and site selectors and property brokers. So using this, we found that there is a spending gap in Wilmington of $121 million, which means that there's a net outflow of $121 million for retail, which is substantial. And we can also see that the sectors, the main sectors that it's in, like motor vehicle sales, building supply, clothing stores, sporting goods. So we looked at that gap, and then from that we thought of what the Main Street corridor and what types of retail would have the best fit, for a corridor setting, not like on a highway interchange setting or on a big box setting necessarily. And so in terms of the industries that have a gap that are appropriate for like the Main Street or Route 38 corridor, the top ones were ones that Wilmington residents actually also indicated are the types of places that they'd like to see more of, like clothing stores, specialty food stores, sporting goods, drinking places, and restaurants. And those are also happen to be, you'll see a little bit later, those are the kind of the experiential type retail that is also can be used for placemaking and is the type of retail that a lot of people are seeking, especially millennial type younger people that a lot of places are trying to attract because those are our future workers. Now looking into the different retail categories by seeing what the funding gap was and knowing how many square feet you need, or how many, what the dollar value is per sales square foot, we're able to at least give a kind of a very rough estimate of, like, if Wilmington was to fulfill the gap in these retail categories, you know, how many square feet it would be, the town would be able to support. And so in most categories, you know, there are a number of square feet that, you know, are relatable. You know, like specialty food stores, an increase to 7,600 square feet. Clothing stores is fairly substantial at 53,000 square feet. Restaurants, 5,200, and drinking places, another 5,200. So, so you can see what the potential fit would be in terms of, like, size of retail for the Main Street type corridor. And now on to our last part, which is the challenges and recommendations. Instead of labeling them, I'm just going to go right into challenge number one. Is you know, Wilmington is seeing the effects of structural shifts in retail that are universal. So basically, because of the advent of e-commerce, which first started 25 years ago, it's kind of unhinged the way that people buy things, and not only in Wilmington but everywhere. But that said, you know, there is still a place for bricks and mortar. I mean, Amazon did just purchase Whole Foods a couple of years ago, and they did that for a purpose, because they have their logistics, they have their delivery mechanisms, but they need the actual locations too, because people still have time-sensitive needs. People need to customize things, and so there is a real reason for bricks and mortar, but it's just kind of changed from what it was 25 years ago. So strategically, places need to be looking at having resilience to the internet competition, and that means, like, personal services, medical facilities, entertainment, as I'm repeating, experiential retail, basically anything that you can't easily order or not even order at all over the internet, and that's the niche that makes for successful retail. And not only smaller communities or medium-sized ones like this, but even large city downtowns like downtown Boston. And even at Linfield's, like, much touted Market Street, which is brand new, they are emphasizing lifestyle now over pure retail. And so if you look at the huge malls that dot the 128 that were put in, like, the 60s and 70s, they would have started pure retail, but you look at places like the North Shore Mall and the Burlington Mall now, and they've, like Linfield, they're shifting to be able to appeal to that lifestyle part as well, so they're not stuck with competing always against Amazon, Wayfair, and others. All right, the second challenge is that even though I was describing a kind of a dynamic growth region, Wilmington's, after speaking to some brokers, it's still on the outside of what they consider to be the hot retail growth markets. The hot retail growth markets are, in terms of, like, for people who actually lack a lot of information, who are making decisions maybe a little bit more by feel or skin of their teeth, they're looking at inside 128, and they're also looking at Sunbelt markets, like more broadly, like Atlanta and Phoenix, and so this also points to the fact that generally it's like the nationals, the big companies, that are looking at these hot growth markets. And so it points to maybe an opportunity in Wilmington to try to support, like, local entrepreneurial retail and restaurant growth, as well as trying to attract more local chains, or maybe encouraging a successful retailer or restaurant or bakery to expand here. And like an example would be like Boston Burger. You know, it's just like it's small, it's local, it's a chain. You know, but they might have be more sensitive to being able to locate in a and not just looking at where the huge growth markets are.
And the owner lives in Wilmington, too.
Oh, okay, all right, well, I
There you
didn't,
go.
that's an added bonus. I have no idea about that. All right, and this came up too, and that Wilmington's property taxes are high. They're the highest among the benchmark towns and among the highest ones in Massachusetts too. But, even though it is high, it's only like marginally higher than a place like Andover. So if any decisions are being made in terms of a location, it's being made right there on the edge. It's, it might not be a central consideration, but it might be one that would have an effect when other factors are taken into consideration. And then for people who are taking just a very superficial look, it might be just optically, it could be taking Wilmington off of a short list when people see that it's kind of on the high side, but it's really, I think, on the margin where it would have any sort of effect. But I do want to bring that to people's attention that if people are just doing a spreadsheet analysis with check boxes, that's one area that Wilmington would come out a little bit on the high side on. And now we'll go into the recommendations. Experiential retail. When we're doing the research for this project, I mean, that's really kind of where it's at. It means for fitness and health, it's medical care, yoga, boxing, exercise studios, creating local eateries, so there are alternatives to chain restaurants. I mean, chain restaurants like Chili's and Sonic that did leave here, they are kind of actually falling a little bit out of favor, whereas places like Chipotle and the more local type places are becoming more popular. The experiential includes like having cooking classes, wine tastings, local coffee shops and tap rooms, bakeries, cafes, local breweries. These are all the types of places that the internet cannot replace, and they're all the types of activity that also can create a stronger sense of community. And West Acton Village Works, I think, is a good example of a type of development that Wilmington may be interested in researching in a little bit more detail, maybe field tripping or something. It's not comprehensive. It does not represent the entire town of Acton, and Acton is kind of similar to Wilmington. It's suburban. It's between 128 and 495. It does have an old kind of ruralish type of character that is now very suburban. But so West Acton Village Works, it's a block-long development, mixed-use development that does offer all these experiential type of retail and restaurants, as well as some office space catering really to personal service, like lawyers, doctors, financial advisors, and it's all in kind of a one dense location. And they have arts classes, and they've got art shows, and Acton, a place that didn't have as much of a sense of community before, is really taking advantage of the Acton, West Acton Village Works, and it's a fairly sharp looking place. And other kind of a smaller thing is like potential of any business, restaurant or retailer wants transparency as well as kind of a clear set of guidelines for what they need to do to be able to occupy a space, so something that would be helpful would be maybe like a one-stop shop of like an inventory of available shop spaces in Wilmington, where people could see this is what's available and this is how I can get in. This is the type of permitting that I need to move into it, and that's something that could be done in cooperation with the Chamber of Wilmington Tewksbury Chamber of Commerce. Oops, wrong one. Reaching for the microphone. In terms of, and another recommendation is to streamline the permitting process. Right now, Wilmington has a special permit process, but for prospective businesses, retailers, and restaurants, there's a connotation that can be time-consuming with multiple meetings. And even if people are not necessarily experiencing it as onerous, someone who's never experienced it, who just sees it that's the way you have to get a permit to be able to put in a certain sort of a business might, again, on the margin, it's like the optics part, might choose to develop a business elsewhere or to expand one elsewhere. And one way to get around that is to have, a zoning by right, which would be instead of having a special permit, having very, very clear, like a multi-use zoning, that permits these uses, so they know that because that is there, that they don't have to get necessarily a special permit. And we took a quick look at Wilmington's new business guide and thought that would be an opportunity to expand that, to make it, to not only is that telling businesses what they need to do to develop a business here, but maybe also make that a little bit more promotional in nature. And improving traffic circulation. The traffic circulation came up as a main concern for the Main Street Route 38 corridor. And there was, I think, two main issues. One was the ease of ingress, and they're related actually. Ease of ingress and egress, which is the capacity as well as a safety concern. And then the other is the internal circulation patterns once you get into the retail on either the east side or the west side, or northwest or southeast side of Main Street, that due to property lines, that the circulation pattern can come to a dead stop because it's not going on to an abutting property that someone needs to go to. So what that ends up, the unintended consequence is that pushes vehicles back onto Main Street so they can go onto their next stop. And so that's a recommendation to be improving that circulation, and the ultimate result of that could be that you kind of end up with having a second parallel Main Street to Route 38, which would add to retail and then also help to improve the circulation pattern, which would make it more attractive to shoppers and retailers. Okay, the last recommendation concerns creating just a comprehensive vision for Wilmington. I mean, this is a town with considerable assets, and through a visioning process and placemaking, those assets can be probably better leveraged, and it could bring about a place like the West Acton Village Works. And this could include, and this, because this would be creating the comprehensive vision, it's like a whole new planning process, kind of like a Main Street program that would assist small businesses, improve curbside aesthetics of retail areas, and then that in turn creates an environment that attracts shoppers and retailers and brings in a better sense of community. And by attracting these retailers and restaurants and increasing a sense of community too, that actually those are the factors that also help to attract certain younger workers also. Younger workers today are looking for more dense, and I'll say it again, the experiential type retail opportunities, places where they can go and walk between places and not necessarily live very far away from where they're shopping. So, so with kind of like Main Street type improvements, and following that, Wilmington, and a successful introduction of that, then it would justify improving kind of like the wayfinding, allowing people to know that there's this retail opportunity and the main, or more of a retail opportunity with more diversity in the Main Street, Route 38 area. And then the town could, I think could also just capitalize on that large, that I mentioned before, that large influx of workers that are coming in every day, letting them know that there are these places to go, and then having the marketing to back that up. So I think there's certainly, the high potential that for a greater retail market in the Route 38 Main Street area with the diversity in offerings that people would like to see in the town. And in a related way, we're talking about that economic development committee, and I think that that's something that the economic development committee could potentially kind of take on, kind of like the next steps of the specific recommended zoning and the town planning that would be needed to support this type of work. So when you mentioned that earlier today, I saw that a segue that relates this retail to your economic development as well. So,
Thank you.
right.
Appreciate it. Are there any comments or questions from members of the board? Yeah, Mr. Bennett.
Well, certainly, thank you very much for being here and for all your work on this study. I think there's certainly a lot to digest, and I know that we'll make this available. The manager and folks here will make it available to folks online, I would imagine, so residents can take a look as well. But certainly some positives, some concerns, some possibilities. But like you mentioned, there's certainly a lot for the if we when we move forward with an economic development committee that they can dive in, as well as the town administration and residents, so that we can take a better look and see what our options are. And I really like the idea, and we had of a vision that you talked about at the very end, and certainly that was something that the former secretary was here. He said Mr. Ash has since moved on from his position in the administration, but when he was here, he talked about, you don't just get to pluck and handpick which business you want to go in a particular location. You have to do a nice job of marketing yourself to that person, pitching what you have to offer. And so I think that that's part of the vision that we can create to attract businesses to come here to Wilmington. So thank you very much for the presentation and for the research here.
All right, well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of quick questions, if you can help me out a little bit. I appreciate the presentation. I know we need to learn a lot. You said that is Wilmington, in one breath, you said Wilmington is behind its growth. I think, from 2010 to 2017, but you say it's on an uptrend? Or are we right now behind in our growth here in the town? That's the impression I'm getting. You're saying we're behind our growth relative to population here in the town.
Well, are you talking about the jobs part of it?
I'm talking about, you were talking, to me, it sounded like residents. You stated Wilmington is behind the growth in population. I was looking, are you talking residents? Are you talking, what were you talking about?
No, right now, Wilmington, 2010 to 17, Wilmington's actually had a fairly remarkable period of population growth.
All right, we're talking residents residing in the town, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, good.
Yeah, and so, as someone who, for part of an organization that looks at trends, statewide, and a change for Massachusetts post-recession is that we have really become much more of a growth state than what we're accustomed to. Especially after little or no population growth between 2000 and 2010, and then all of a sudden it's we had to change our population projections. We do the population projections that the foundational ones that the state uses for transportation planning and school planning and things like that. And so population growth is growing faster now than we'd expect. I think it's part of the fact that the Boston area has such a good economy. And then Wilmington, we see that its resident population is participating in that growth wave that we're seeing statewide, well, specifically in the greater Boston area.
Are you saying right now at the moment, the town of Wilmington's population is behind on its growth? You're saying, is that what you're saying?
No, can I just
No.
interject? You have it as Wilmington is above the growth of the United States and Massachusetts, and at least according to page 3.
Just if I could interject as well, if you turn to the next page, it shows that we're more or less in line, but slightly slower in terms of population growth for the 7 other comparable communities.
Yeah, that's the part
So,
that
yeah.
It's
You
that
did say
you're,
that we seem
that's
like
not,
we're
that's actually a
behind.
positive. I mean, it's a
Yeah, I
positive
mean,
because you're part of
We
a,
don't want to be too high on that spectrum.
yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. What's so, if you can tell me, why is that such a bad thing?
I think it's a good thing. I mean, it shows that the town itself is growing, and it's part of a region that's growing, maybe albeit even a little bit more quickly
Right.
overall than the town itself.
And I appreciate the input. Now, you did say, in one breath, you did say the taxes in Wilmington are considerably high. And I'm reading it, of the 351 cities and towns, Wilmington is within, 18 of those cities and towns on the highest on the spectrum. You agree to that?
Yes, yeah,
Right.
that's a fact.
All right, that is a fact.
But that's for commercial.
That's what I'm
and
saying,
that's
just for
not
commercial.
residential.
Commercial, within
Okay.
351 cities and town, that's what I stated, the tax in the commercial is high. That's what you're saying. What would you recommend to us to bring that rate down? How do you bring that rate down? The only thing I could see by doing so is now, which is not gonna be a great move, which I wouldn't even do it, now you gotta raise the residential rate to bring down the commercial rate. That's the only way that's ever gonna happen, if you take a look at that, so there's a big difference between out here and some certain areas, but.
I mean, that's always a balancing act
Yeah,
between
I
the
know,
residential
it's just
side and
gotta
the
look at
commercial
that.
side. And as I also mentioned, it's not, like Andover's is not that much lower, and then if you look at the valuations of Andover being higher, the actual burden of commercial property tax would be fairly close together. And, but I'm just saying that for when companies are checklisting all the different factors, for the potential expansion, or if they want to do a startup, it could be that could land, in their check mark list. It may not.
And then, Mr. Eaton just
Okay,
wants to
great.
jump
Yeah,
in
thanks.
quickly, then I can come back to you.
Yes, it sounded, it was a bit of a surprise to me to, I guess, hear that the commercial tax rate is not, it doesn't seem like it's as much of a hurdle as maybe I had assumed so, because while we're a little bit higher, we're just a little bit higher than a lot of the other communities in the area. So if a business is thinking about moving to the Wilmington area, I think you had said it, if you're looking at a spreadsheet, it might just be a checkbox, but we're not so far off from a lot of the surrounding communities. One of the things that had stuck out to me is the meals tax, and I think we had a bar chart that showed Burlington, which certainly has an awful lot of restaurants compared to Wilmington, and they had like 1.8 million, I think, in annual revenue just on meals tax, and we're a little bit less than 400,000 a year. So there are other ways to do it other than just, ticking down the commercial tax rate and jacking up the residential tax rate. There are other ways that we can do it, such as, a couple restaurants come to town and move up and open up, all of a sudden that starts to factor into that, and actually it's not just a single factor analysis where you just, one goes down, one goes up. There are other ways to kind of approach this.
The local option, yeah.
Thank you for such a thorough, I read it once and then tried reading it again today, report. I think it's very helpful. Very glad to hear that it's going to be on our website so the residents can see it. They paid for it, so they should see it. So I agree with John, Mr. Eaton here, that there are, and everyone else on the board, that there are other ways to increase our tax base. And you mentioned Burlington, they have a lot of high-end restaurants, so the tax rate for meals tax is gonna go up there. Hotels, there's a local local also there. Not that there's gonna be one on Main Street, but that's another option. We don't have any in town. So there are other ways to increase our tax base other than putting it on the residents and the commercial base.
Yeah, and I think that we point in the report that Wilmington is likely with the relative affluence and with its age structure, this market, I would think, should be able to support, a higher end restaurant in that corridor area, a larger, higher scale restaurant that would, generate, those meal tax revenues ultimately, and also bring some good to the town too, in terms of being a place where, people can gather for various functions.
I mean, I drove through Woburn Center the other day, and they're all nothing but restaurants now. And the Woburn Mall is gonna be torn down. It's gonna be one of those places like Linfield with residents. So there's a lot going on, not only all around us, not in Wilmington, unfortunately.
Mr. Bendel? you
Yeah,
have something?
thank you. One of the things I failed to mention was that I know that we're going to share this with the residents, but if Mr. Hull wouldn't mind if we could share this with our representatives at the State House as well. I know Mr. Robinson's in the audience, and this is certainly a subject that I know he's very interested in as well, so we will share this information with him. But, him and I have had conversations about this topic, and he's spent a lot of time on this, so hopefully we can share with those folks as well.
Just a couple of comments. Certainly the point that was made about the commercial industrial property tax, one of the, I think, points, questions that would be, and we can look at this, find out internally, but how many communities across the Commonwealth have a split tax rate? I think that would be important to know. I suspect, but I don't know this for certain, that the majority of communities across the state have a single rate. Clearly, as Karen Rashis has noted in the various presentations over the years, if Wilmington had a single tax rate, the average tax bill to the homeowner would be much higher than it is right now. So
23 and change.
The longstanding practice, I think since the split tax rate became an option, has been to shift the maximum to the commercial industrial property owners, which has certainly been a benefit to the residents, but may, and it's hard to gauge, have some measure of impact on folks that are considering Wilmington. But even at that, we still certainly have been competitive in terms of some of the companies that have come in recently, whether it's Target or Osram, Sylvania. So I think we still do well in that category.
I think they're looking at a lot of other things just beyond the tax rate when they're located here.
Right.
Like highway access, labor access.
We all set for questions, comments? Mr. Stewart, thank you very much for
All
this
right, well, thank you.
comprehensive report. It's great. Thank you.
Thanks. All right.
Okay, our 8:45 appointment with Valerie Gingrich, Director of Planning and Conservation, regarding inclusionary zoning bylaw. Give you a second to get acclimated there again.
I'm ready if you are.
I'm ready.
Okay.
All right.
Well, good evening. Wanted to, I guess, present and sort of review. I know some of you may be familiar with, I think actually all of you came to our workshops that we held on inclusionary zoning this fall. The idea was to sort of get the word out on what this topic means before we started drafting a complicated bylaw. So now we have that complicated bylaw, and I'd like to kind of go over it. First, maybe go over some background, especially for the folks at home. What is inclusionary zoning? And that is zoning that requires affordable housing units with the construction of market rate housing units. So I like to give examples. If there's a 15% affordable requirement, a 20-unit development would need to provide 3 affordable units. So 15% of that 20-unit development would be 3 affordable units. So you'd end up with 17 market rate units and 3 affordable units. This is a tool that's used to maintain affordable housing percentages as more housing is built in general. So as we add homes to town, this would be a way to keep a percentage of them as affordable as we grow. I kind of made a list of towns that have inclusionary requirements. Most of our surrounding, with the exception of North Reading, and it's really not a new tool. It's been used for quite a while now, so we were able to use other people's bylaws to see what works and what doesn't work, and kind of not reinvent the wheel. Another thing to go over is what is affordable. What do we mean by affordable? This is a term that the state defines, and they define it as prices at which those earning up to 80% of the area median income can pay their rent or mortgage with 30% of their income. So breaking it down, the area median income in this area, which includes more than just Wilmington, is just about $108,000, and 80% area median income. The limits for what a family could make would be about $81,000, and then for an individual would be just under $57,000. So folks making those incomes or less would qualify, and we wanted to give some examples of who those people are. So I put some different starting salaries up there, you know, a librarian, a nurse, restaurant manager, seniors have very low incomes, fixed incomes. So some of the examples, and these are also folks in town. The numbers on the bottom, they're a little hard to see, but as of the 2010 census, half of the town's households make less than the area median income, and 20% of households in town make less than $50,000. So folks who are living here now, residents in town, a good portion of them could qualify for affordable housing. Another thing to sort of review and go over, and this is probably familiar to some of you who came to our workshops, just going over the cost of development. So I gave 2 examples, different style of unit, a 1-bedroom flat and a 3-bedroom duplex. And those pictures are just to kind of illustrate the type of unit. They're not actual projects that I'm talking about, but the construction cost for each type of unit is going to vary with the style. And those construction costs that we show up there for those examples were given to us by a local housing consultant. So they are very real local numbers that we received for cost of construction for a unit. So using the 1-bedroom flat, it cost $260,000 to build that unit. For an affordable unit, you can only sell it for $173,000. So for that unit, you're taking a loss of $87,000. The loss goes up with the 3-bedroom duplex because the construction cost goes up, and the sales price goes up a little bit, but it doesn't make up for what it costs to build. So just sort of reviewing that when it comes to affordable units, this is why they're always subsidized, because it costs more to build them than you're going to get back. So what can we do about this? There are ways of offsetting that cost And you can provide a density bonus, it's called. And the idea is that, and the example I give here is that, for every affordable unit that's required and built, a developer could get an additional market rate unit on top of what they're allowed to offset the cost of building that affordable unit. So again, with that 20-unit development with the 15% affordable requirement, you would have 17 market rate units, and then you have the 3 affordable that are required, but then you would add in another 3 market rate as bonus units, and you would get a total of 23 housing units. So the total number of units does increase. That's the idea. And we'll get into more of that as we get into the actual bylaw. Wanted to go over how we came up with what we came up with. And that was, we have this 2004 Affordable Housing Plan. So we dusted that off, we took a look at that, and it's actually a really good sort of basis for starting this effort. A lot of good information. The number one recommendation was to create an inclusionary housing bylaw. So we took what was in this plan and you kind of used it as a baseline for testing it, testing what folks thought. The other source was bylaws from other towns, stories from other towns, consultants, housing consultants. We used community feedback from our workshops and community feedback that we've received after the draft has been out. So as we go through the key components of the draft, you'll see them organized by sort of these topics. Those key components of the bylaw, and these are sort of the major topics: applicability, the kind of geographical area where it applies and the size development where it applies, the percentage requirement, density bonus, off-site construction, whether to allow that, and payment in lieu of units, which we'll go over when we get there, and whether to allow that. So taking them one by one, the first one being the applicability. So where does this apply and to what size project? The 2004 housing plan talked about any housing development of 8 units or more would be required to provide affordable housing units. All of our surrounding towns focus on certain districts or type of development. That's typically multifamily. So the requirement isn't for all types of residential development. Andover focuses on mixed use and multifamily districts, as do actually most of them. The most popular threshold size of project was either 4 or 6 units for the requirement to kick in. And the draft bylaw proposes the inclusionary requirement for development of 8 or more units in the neighborhood mixed use district and the central business district, where we allow multifamily housing development. So far, resident feedback has sort of pushed for a little bit of a lower threshold. 6 or more units was the most popular thing we've heard so far. And some believe that the requirement should be for all types of housing development, including single-family homes. And we'll get into that closer to the end because it's sort of complicated. So we'll keep that to the end. Percentage requirement. The percentage of housing units that are required to be restricted as affordable. 2004 housing plan recommends at least 15%. The surrounding towns have varied requirements. Some of them are 10%. Most popular was 15%. You'll see 20 and 25 in there. Reading has a smart growth district, so that's required to be 20, at least 20%. Burlington does it a little differently. They do 1 affordable per every 10 market rate, which can be anywhere from 10% to 30%, depending on the size of the project. You'll see some towns in that list twice, and that's because they require a different percentage in different districts or for different types of projects. So you can get really in the weeds with this and tailor it to what you're looking for. The draft bylaw proposes 15%. Resident feedback has suggested requiring more than that, which is understandable. The more the better. The reason we went with 15% was because the state requirement of 10%, if you're trying to sort of maintain a percentage and stay above that 10% as one of your goals, you know, not every project is going to have to provide affordable housing. It's going to be too small, or it's going to be a different type. So where you do require it, the idea is to provide require a little over 10% so that you're kind of making up for it a little bit as you go. Woburn actually just last year changed their requirement. They had their requirement at 10%, and they upped it to 15% because of that reason, so that they would keep up. Density bonus, the provision of additional market rate units to offset the cost of building affordable units. The 2004 housing plan, the wording in there was that for each additional affordable unit created, the developer may be allowed up to 3 additional market rate units. Almost all of our surrounding towns provide density bonuses. I think there was Woburn as an exception to that. They're different. They do it different ways. Some allow up to 20% increase in units. Others are 1 for 1. And that's actually what we're proposing, 1 additional market rate unit for each affordable unit provided. I think developers would like to see that a little bit higher, but this was also the most popular choice when we surveyed folks at the workshops and our feedback so far. Off-site construction. This is the idea that you could allow the construction of the affordable units to occur on a different site, but you would want to do it at the same time. Our 2004 housing plan stated that providing off-site units should be considered as an alternative to building units on-site if approved by the permitting authority. Half of our surrounding towns allow off-site construction in a limited way or under unique circumstances. And then half of the towns do not allow off-site construction at all. The bylaw that we've drafted proposes allowing off-site construction only in unique and extraordinary circumstances through the planning board's special permit process. And the reason why we decided that was, I think typically we're going to want to see those units be constructed on-site in probably almost every case, but there could be a special circumstance where in this one extraordinary case, it would actually be beneficial for them to be built off-site. I don't know what that circumstance is, but we can't anticipate every circumstance. So this would just be a way of building a little bit of flexibility. One thing I've seen that people talk about that is intriguing is, let's say a developer has to build 1 affordable as part of their project. They could, in theory, they could work out a way to secure a single-family ranch home, renovate it, and restrict it as an affordable unit as their affordable requirement, instead of working that unit into whatever they're developing. So in that way, you could be preserving a different kind of housing stock. You could see how it may be beneficial, but I think we have to set maybe a high bar for that, because I think we're going to want those affordable units being built with the project that's being built. So far, resident feedback was to allow the off-site, and then it was followed with maybe, which I think kind of reflects it may be appropriate in some circumstances, but probably not usually. Payment in lieu of units. This topic, I hate to even bring this topic up because this is the idea of allowing the developer to contribute funds to the town for affordable housing instead of building the units when they're building their project. The 2004 housing plan does not recommend that payments in lieu of units be included as an alternative. and actual units are preferred, and it would be a burden for the town to collect money and become the housing developer. Most of our surrounding towns do allow a payment in lieu of. Reading and Woburn do not provide for it. The draft bylaw does not provide for it. And resident feedback, we've been on with this one, it hasn't been supportive of payment in lieu of units. This sort of, we've seen, I think Tewksbury is a good example of where they've had some real challenges when they're growing with their housing. Their development housing development is thriving, but the developers haven't been building those affordable units into those projects, and now the town has money, and it's the responsibility of the town to go build those units, and it's not our expertise. So much rather have the developers do what they do best and build the units, and then they're mixed in to each development as it's built, instead of the town kind of trying to, I think you tend towards getting them clustered in one place if the town becomes a developer, just because of the nature of it. So that's the list of the key components. There are a bunch of other intricate kind of details that I've gotten really actually pretty good comments on. I did promise that we'd go back to the single family discussion, so we should do that. And the feedback I've gotten is that why not require this for all types of housing development? Applying this to single family subdivisions is very tricky. It's difficult because when you're building those units, typically they're large, they're expensive. That's what the market is providing right now. And when you build an affordable unit, it's supposed to be you're not supposed to be able to distinguish between the market rate and the affordable units. So essentially you're supposed to build one of those large, expensive homes as an affordable unit. There's the obvious price difference, right? Those units are selling for $700,000-$800,000, and an affordable unit is going to sell for under $300,000. So there's the cost of building that. There's the price differential. But then there's also sort of, even if they were to build one of those big, expensive homes and have it as an affordable unit, I worry that it's not only the purchase price that you have to take into account. It's maintaining a large home, maintaining all the infrastructure that goes with it. So even if it was priced at an affordable price, it's a very expensive endeavor to own that home. And I've heard of other towns trying to kind of create, you can create a smaller, different style home, but then it kind of sticks out because you have a single family development, you can tell which one's smaller, you can tell which one's different. So there are challenges with that. There's some ways that you can try to work around it. One of those ways was brought up as a comment from a resident, and I think it's a good comment that maybe that's the case where you allow payments instead of actually building units. Then you have to work out how much is the payment, and you have to set up an affordable housing trust fund, and you have to kind of create the infrastructure. So all of that is something that I think we should keep talking about. And I'm thinking that, though, we should probably start with what I think we can, hopefully, folks agree that applying this to multifamily development is a positive thing, and a place that we can kind of start with this tool. So that was the thought. We can get into more of the details, and I'm happy to answer questions if you'd like.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. been looking forward to this for a long time. This is great. Yes, Mr. Loud.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Valerie, thank you. Read the draft a couple times. I went to the workshop. You put a lot of work into this, and it's excellent. I'm very excited that there's an inclusionary bylaw, hopefully come with the town. It's been needed for a long time. Why only neighborhood mixed-use district and central business district? Because you need to explain that. That limits us greatly. And another comment is 8, why not 6? Why not 5? Why not? I agree with you on the streets that are out there. You're going to build 10 McMansions because that's what the market wants, and 1 or 2 small houses really doesn't make sense. I'm definitely not in favor of payment in lieu, no matter what happens, because that gives the developer a scapegoat. Now, building off-site is a different subject, something we really should look at, but can you explain, I mean, my main sticking point is neighborhood mixed-use district, which is basically Main Street and Lowell Street, for the most part. That's what that bylaw was intended for when we voted on it a couple years ago. And then the central business district. Can you explain to me why just those 2 and not other districts?
Sure. So those are the 2 districts where we allow multifamily.
Right, yep, yep.
So those are the districts where you'll see apartments and condos. We actually don't allow single families in those districts. So it's
Right.
going to be, the idea has always been that those districts are more of a village scale, centered around commercial uses that are already there, taking advantage of those, and also in historically village type settings, Perry's Corner and Main Street. And so the mixed-use district and the central business district is where, because we're allowing multifamily, we're going to see, I guess, the more of the housing unit numbers. So more housing units are going to be built in those districts as opposed to other districts. So this was applying it to those. It also, having affordable units with multifamily, they fit in better, right? Because all the units are essentially looking the same typically. So there's no problem with, different styles or not fitting in. So this was a way to focus on where we're going to see unit growth, and almost it's the way to get the most bang for our buck, I guess.
Yeah.
And while we have one currently residentially zoned, probably larger parcel in town that could be a subdivision at some point, the tracts of land that can be future subdivisions are decreasing very quickly. It's hard to think of others that'll be significant subdivisions anymore. Other than that one
But they
large
seem
parcel.
to pop up, 1 or 2 pop up a year usually.
Yeah, they're
Tearing
tending
down a
to.
house or 2 houses and.
Yeah. Yep.
And-
You're seeing more, 2 lot, or like 4 or 5 lots or less.
Yeah.
But you're not seeing, I think the major ones where you're getting 30 some houses, we don't have those left anymore, except for maybe an exception.
Well, I don't disagree with the mixed use, and I don't disagree because you make valid. They're great points. I just thought it was limiting the town to just those 2 districts. And then one other point, and I'm sure, why 15 and not 20%?
Yeah. When you get up to, what we've seen is that when you get up into the 20 or 25s, those type of bylaws are either smart growth districts that allow a lot more density, or they're districts that give a lot of density bonus back to the developer. And we weren't necessarily interested in, upping the density a whole lot or at all, or giving a large density bonus back. So if you require that larger percent, you're going to have to kind of give a little more than,
The reason why I ask is because 40B is a minimum is 20%.
yep.
Then my last question is, when these affordables are being built within a development, I don't see anything where it's required that they're built at the same time. And I give you an example. I live across from Whispering Pines. We saw an empty slab for 8 or 9 years before they built the second building because the economy went south. So is there somewhere in here where we allow, where it's mandatory that you build 2 affordables, you build one, you build 2 market or 3 market rates and you build 1 affordable? So the developer down the road can't say, I can't sell my market rates, but, you know what I mean? Is there some protections for the town where we gave you that density, Mr. Developer, now build your affordables at the same rate you build in the market rates?
We didn't put anything in as far as phasing goes. So the only time where it would matter, so you have to have, before your project's complete, you have to have everything built, right? So,
Right.
but if it's a phased project where, there's a building 1 and a building 2, or Spruce Farm.
I know
right.
that he's
Yeah.
building some of the affordables at the same time. That's
Yeah.
what asked me the question.
Yeah.
Made me ask the question, or
Right,
some
so-
protections, because he's doing it in my eyes correctly, but who says the next developer is not going to?
Yeah, so instead of putting something in the zoning bylaw, what I thought worked better was when the planning board has to issue a special permit for multifamily housing. So any multifamily housing development has to go to the planning board. So they issue a decision on that. And with Spruce Farm, they issued a special permit, and within that approval, we worked out, phasing.
Okay.
So,
So that's something that can be regulated at the planning board level?
yeah,
Okay.
yep. And we would want to, because.
Yep, exactly.
But it's hard to predict how to say it in a bylaw that it'll apply appropriately to every project, because they're phased differently. Some aren't
Well-
phased at all.
I'm skeptic because of Whispering Pines, I was not in favor of that. That was before Valerie, so I will at least say that publicly. They came back to the Board of Appeals after they got their permit to reduce the number up from 25% to 20%. And then they came back again to get a couple not over 55 buildings in there. And I just don't want to see that happen again. Not that there's gonna be any over 55 developments, but that happened. And I just don't wanna see it happen again, is what I'm trying to prevent. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Reed.
Thank you, Ms. Gingrich. I know that this has been a long time coming, but you certainly did your research and looked at a lot of other communities and how that they're approaching this too. Certainly the 2 things that people are always going to debate, whether or not you pick the right numbers, are the threshold and the percentages. And there's always going to be discussion as to whether or not you pick the right ones. I think it's important to recognize that the goal of these is to kind of make inroads into that 10% goal of affordable housing. And the more you tinker with the numbers, if you have a lower threshold and a higher percentage, I think the fear is what you're doing is you're creating a de facto, construction or basically a moratorium on new construction, which defeats the purpose of the inclusionary zoning bylaw, because nobody's building anything, and just the affordable housing rate, or the units stay the same, the rate stays the same, and then you open up the town to a 40B development. I had last week the opportunity to go to a Woburn Neighborhood Association meeting about the Ledges project that's just over the border on 38, and while they are still kind of waiting for the final plan from the developer, this is a project in Woburn that was 12 years in the going, and Woburn did everything that they could to try and prevent it from happening, and they finally, earlier this month, lost their last chance of an appeal in front of the SJC, and they're looking at a pretty substantial project, and the entire neighborhood is very vocal, and has been the entire time, about it going there. The problem with 40B housing is you lose local control. So whatever are in the bylaws, it really doesn't matter. The developer gets to come in and build whatever they want, wherever they want. Issues like inclusionary zoning bylaws, I don't think it's a solution to the problem, but it's a part of the solution. I think this is a very good draft. Again, the economic reality of the situation is you can't just make it, you can't have the threshold very, very low and the percentage very, very high, because again, it's become self-defeating. But I do think that this is a step in the right direction. So well done, Ms. Gingrich.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McCoy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Valerie, I was around back a few years ago. The bottom line is on Dartmouth Ave on Lowell Street, all the way to the school buses where Lucci owns. That's neighborhood mix, and you go across the street where the corner is Woburn Street, that area, that's also neighborhood mix, and you talk about Main Street. And also the Central Business District, Wilmington Center. But we're forgetting, there is a Central Business District in North Wilmington with a registry of motor vehicles. So that also has the possibility of this kind of development, because that was zoned back, I don't know, 2003 or so, and it was zoned Central Business District, but it passed the town meeting. That's fine. Is the planning board at the moment going to, we're looking for this inclusionary zone. I know the chairman has talked about it. Many people up here have talked about it. Are we going to implement that if it does pass at the town meeting, and I'm sure it will, just in those areas? Or is there anything in the pipeline, and I'm talking about the planning board themselves, or them even creating more? I would like to see this inclusionary zone limit to where it is, and let's see what happens. Let's see what it's going to look like before we start turning the town upside down of other areas on Main Street, other areas on Lowell Street. And then someone's going to be more creative and say, well, maybe we should do more of the town center. Well, now that we've done that, maybe we should go down by Eli's area and make that an area as well. You know, I'm just saying that's, you know, we do things in baby steps, and I have no problem. I supported that. Is there any failing on that planning board that they're going to be happy with the present area of this so-called inclusionary zone? Are they looking to incorporate more? That's where I've got an issue.
I think it's mixed. I think that probably the more of the reality of the situation, sort of the compromise at the moment is, of course, between, you know, a development community who we're asking something of, and then folks who think that we need, and we do need, more affordable housing. And there's sort of this, you know, I think it's almost, it would be great if we could apply it to everything, right? Where we could get affordable units with any type of development that happens. I think there's going to be a resistance to that. And, you know, and I think the reasons are real from the development community about concerns about applying the requirement to single-family homes. So I think that applying it in these limited places is a place where we can start. I think there's always going to be folks who think we should apply it everywhere. There's probably folks who think we shouldn't apply it anywhere. So this might be a way of applying it where it makes most sense. But I expect that the conversation will continue into the future. But this is what is sort of agreed upon as what we should do at this point.
All right, I'll just continue if I can, Mr. Chairman. I know we said back maybe a year or so ago when it comes to the 2020 census, and I'm not going to hold you to the number, but it was talked about maybe 70, 72 units. By 2020, we may be like in a deficit of, say, 20 units where we need, 70 units, excuse me, for affordable. And I'm not going to hold you to it. Would that be kind of accurate, around 72 or 75, even let's say 100?
Ballpark.
You know, ballpark, yeah. All right. You know, and but that's not a lot. What we really need to do is, you know, I don't think we need to turn the town upside down. We shouldn't panic right now to say, let's rezone more property in the community because of the 70 to 100 units. And I'll even say 100. I think it's less, but say 100. I mean, we shouldn't push the panic button to accomplish that goal right here at the second. Why don't we just do things in piecemeal? I have no problem with the town's already zoned. And I know I'm just one individual and there's 4 other folks. And obviously the folks will have final say at the town meeting. You know, hopefully it's kind of rainy that day. But anyway, that's what it all comes down to. Is why don't we do what we said we were going to do and see what happens. But if we start looking to rezone other parcels in town, more areas, you know, then we're really changing the dynamics. And I'll tell you, we keep on going by this formula. are we actually ever going to get to the percentage of affordable housing that the state mandates? It seems like it's going to get more and more and more and more. Why don't we just sit back a little bit and take care with it at hand that we already approved? That's where I'm coming from. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah,
Thank
Mr.
you, Mr.
Bendel?
Chairman. Valerie, thanks so much. I know you spent a lot of time on this, and so certainly thank you for your efforts. And I, like my colleagues, had an opportunity to attend one of the workshops. So the first question I have is, do you have any idea on the numbers and the feedback from folks you got, like survey results? I know it was also recently published in the media. Any idea how many people filled out your survey? Or?
Yeah, it wasn't a large number of people. I think it was like 40, 45, so it was a lower number. And those folks, are the folks who are engaged in this type of thing, which is helpful in one way that they kind of know the topic. But I think we're going to see a skew towards folks who want to see this happen. So it's not like we're getting a balanced approach. But I have had conversations with developers and in town, and making sure that we at least, I don't expect them to come out to a workshop and, but making sure that we're getting kind of both sides and all sides of input to draft this in a way that hopefully, can be something that more than, a large range of people can support.
Thank you. Yes, certainly. There's no question you put a lot of effort into this. My next question is, so we have before us the draft. So could you just talk to me about like what your idea going forward is? So this is a draft, when it might become final, when folks could still give input after maybe seeing this conversation on TV? Or?
Thank you. Yes. That's why it's still a draft. We're trying to get as much feedback as we can. Feedback on the town meeting floor isn't necessarily as useful as feedback is now. Looking for more feedback. The planning board actually at our last meeting last week, we talked about the feedback on 6 or more units being the threshold, and there was a positive discussion around that maybe we bring the 8 down to a 6. So those changes can still, there's still input to be had on this, and looking for that, certainly, over the next, very soon. It needs to be finalized pretty soon.
So if folks have input, they could reach out to your office?
Yes, call, email, stop by, any way they'd like.
And will you have another planning board meeting in the near future that this will be discussed, so that people could attend?
Yeah, that's yes.
So they have opportunities?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Hull, you had something?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. I think reiterating what has been said to some measure. I think, as with any legislation that, particularly when you get into something that's complicated like this, it needs to be a compromise, a middle-of-the-road type of situation. So there are going to be some people that want it all and expect that this will be should apply to all zones, but when we consider the various interest parties, whether it's residents that are looking for affordable units for themselves, their friends, family, and so on, they want to ultimately have something come out of this town meeting. We have the development community, and I don't think they should be castigated as the evil empire. They're in the business of building homes, but they also have to be able to stay in business to build homes. So when you talk about affordable units, as Valerie noted in her early part of the presentation, there's a significant cost to developing affordable units. So, I think one of the things we have to be mindful of going forward here is what is achievable at town meeting, and perhaps it isn't everything that everyone wants, but getting a little of something and then working on that going forward is better than not getting anything at all. And I guess the other point I would make with respect to neighborhood mixed and central business, to the extent that some of these units are apartments, as many people know, those all become included towards that number, so you get more bang for your buck, so to speak, as opposed to affordable units that might be in a subdivision.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Just one quick point. When you were talking about the 20 units, and I get that, the density bonus, and I understand that, 3, because obviously, you have to make money because of the affordables. Is it going to be the same like the neighborhood mix? So in other words, if you're looking at 20 units, you're looking at 3 stories built on a little tad more than 2 acres of property. Is that what that comes down to?
The zoning would remain the same.
Okay.
So the zoning allowances and requirements would be the same, except that the way we drafted it is the planning board could vary certain things to allow for those additional units, right? So we're probably not going to want to go up in height. And so the question is, and this is one of those detailed pieces, is what they can vary to get those extra units in. And so far, the way it's drafted, they can vary the open space requirement, which is 30%. So they could decrease that. I've gotten some feedback that maybe we add parking to that list, although I'm not sure that folks are going to want to decrease parking. But maybe if it's in the central business district, maybe then you would want to decrease parking. So maybe adding some things to the list of dimensional aspects that could be reworked to increase the unit number. But the zoning itself stays the same.
All right, so right now it's 10.8 units per acre. And I appreciate your honesty, like right now, so there's a possibility of, you're saying maybe change in open space. In other words, it sounds like to me, decrease open space, whatever, therefore increase in units. Is that what we're talking as well? This is something that's going to be new now.
Right.
In this
So
inclusionary zone, not what's in the neighborhood mix.
right. So to be able to give the density bonus,
Right.
to add those units,
You have to take from
you're going to
somewhere.
add on to your building a little bit, right?
Mhm.
To get 3 more units. So you're going to cover more of that lot with the building
Right.
than you were without those 3 units.
All right.
So there'll have to be some way to be able to kind of tweak the.
All right. All right. All right. Thank you. All right. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else have it? Anybody in the audience have a comment or question? We'll open it up a little bit here. Yes, just to state your name and address, yep.
Suzanne Sullivan, 60 Lawrence Street. Just to weigh in on the density bonus and doing away with the open space requirement, I personally am totally opposed to that. And I would, if that passed at town meeting, I would probably look to call a special to rescind it. Essentially what you do, so in central business district, and correct me if I'm wrong, Valerie, there is no open space requirement. So you can basically have building and parking lot on the whole lot with no open space. So in neighborhood business, what you have is you have 30% requirement. So if you do away with that 30% requirement, essentially what you do is you create central business district in the neighborhood mixed use, basically is what you're doing. You're talking about super dense, very unattractive. It's okay in central business district to some extent because you have, the rail line there and it's a little bit of a different dynamic than say on Lowell Street. I would be totally opposed to that. I'm just telling you it. And I know I'm not the only one, so I think that we need to work something out differently to increase those units. I would also caution, if you go down to 6, and correct me if I'm wrong here, if you go from 8 to 6, you actually increase the density. Because you would actually require 2 more units, right? If you go down to every 6th unit, they would be required to build only 1 or 2. Because then you're at 12, and the 12, if say, no?
No. If we went down to 6, they would be required to build 1 unit.
Okay, so if somebody builds 12 units, then how many would they be required to build?
12 units, 2 affordable.
So if it was 8 units, and it would be only 1. I don't know, I see, you know what I'm saying? It seems like the higher you get in the number, that would actually increase the number of units that they would be required to build. The higher number that you get if you use the 6. So that's all I'm saying, is that actually would increase the density. Because it would require the number of units that they're after. It may not be a lot if it's 12, but if you start to get up to like 40, it's going to. right?
Yeah, we did put a maximum of what could be added on as units, because we felt like we didn't want to have that be never-ending. The central business district, for multifamily, there's actually different open space requirements for different types of construction. So it sort of dials into whether you have one building versus multiple for the open space requirement. The other thing is we could write in sort of a minimum too, so that you never get to that situation where you don't have open space. And the other part is that with Wilmington being as wet as it is, you're gonna have open space.
Yeah, but the wetlands aren't supposed to be counted into the open space, so that's not fair. So, I mean, I would just caution, because essentially what you end up doing is sacrificing the character of the town, and I'm just not really willing to do that myself. I mean, I'm all for the inclusion. I already sat on the 2004, and I can't believe it's 14 years since we did that plan. That's disappointing enough as it is. But I don't think that we should give up. And I'm not sure what the plan recommends. I can't even remember. It's been so long. I don't think we've recommended giving up the open space requirements just because we wanted to preserve the character of the town. And the 55 and older development, that's one of the main, if you read the purposes in the 55 and over, inclusionary part of that bylaw, and just for the board to understand, there is an inclusionary component of the 55 and older. The 55 and older purposely states not to impact the character of the town with the inclusionary aspect. And I would expect that we should want to do that here too. And sometimes at the beginning in the mission statement, you know, we talk about in the mission statement in the bylaw that we want to increase the inclusionary of the affordable units, but we should also want to protect the character of the town in doing so, because that's part of our master plan. So we don't want to create too much traffic or, you know, things that are not aesthetically pleasing to the town and change the character of the town. That's my input. Thank you very much.
Anybody else wishes? Yes.
My apologies for walking just in. I was watching on TV, Frank West, 2 Birchwood Road. I've had conversations with Valerie about, you know, my opinions, and I've expressed my opinions to this board. My opinion has and still remains that the amount, you're talking 15%, I still believe that it should be higher. I think it was in your chat earlier, Valerie, I think it was Burlington and Billerica that I think has a 30% requirement, if I'm not mistaken. So, you know, if there's a way to do either a 20 or 25%, I think would help us get and maintain that 10% threshold. Again, I know this isn't the only answer to get keeping the 10%, but if we could use this to our advantage, the town's advantage, to do that, I think that would be great. I agree with Suzanne about, you know, keeping the open space component on there, because you don't want buildings and driveways and a couple of house plants, and we call that, you know, the affordable, we call that our development. I've strongly suggested that, although I understand this, you know, taking baby steps, for lack of a better term, I fully believe that we should be looking at single-family houses as well, because how many single-family houses have we built in the last 2, 3, 4 years? I mean, 2, 3, 400? And would you guess probably 50, 60 houses a year? Ballpark, 40, 50?
Yeah, it's more like
I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
20 to 30. No, I just looked at it actually,
Yeah.
because I wanted to see how on track we've been. We've been adding about 35 homes per year in the last couple years.
Yeah, so every time we do that, we lose three or four potentials for 3, 4, 5 affordables, and it gets us further away from the 10% goal. The other thing, probably one of my last comments, is I noticed that when you were doing your 15% math, you said you had, what was it, that chart, you had 15%, it was 20 units. So you ended up with 17 affordable and 17 market rate and 3 affordable. That really runs under 15%, because 15% is actually 3.5, and you lose that half a unit. And again, I get it, you gotta figure out, people don't live in half houses. But what you wouldn't want to see is a developer come in and kind of use that fuzzy math to their advantage and say, well, I'm gonna build phase 1 like this. I might come back with a phase 2 or a phase 3, and we lose another, couple of units because we did a little fuzzy math to come down to 3 as opposed to up to 4. Would there be a way that if the number comes above a certain percentage threshold, that becomes a positive number, a whole number? If somebody comes up and says the total is, hey, I'm building out and it's gonna be 3.4, is there a way to make that 4 units, not a 4th unit, not down? I don't know if there's, if you can do that in your plan, or if there's a way to modify that.
Did I read in here that there was a rounding? A rounding up?
The number rounds up at the half mark. So, 3.5 would be 4.
Right, so it's in there.
3.5 in your example was 3.
I'd have to
Yeah.
look at
That
it.
was at the very beginning, she was just giving
Right.
an overall example, but I think in the draft, there is a roundup on that component.
But again, these are just a few. I know that, I've been talking to you guys for a couple of years now on this, and as Suzanne said, we've been doing this since 2004, if not earlier. So I just, somebody that's been kind of, a proponent of this publicly too, especially to this board, I think that, again, I think you should use, you got the chance to do this, do it to the town's advantage more than the builder's advantage. So.
Is there someone else? Yep, go ahead.
Ethan Sawyer, 58 Lawrence Street. I guess, I'm not very familiar with this whole topic, but, I would guess I was wondering how important us hitting that 10% goal really was. I mean, how much of a priority that is for the town versus just trying to get affordable housing built. Because I think just based on, quick math, I figure if we had 15% to catch up to 75, we'd have to build 1,500 units, right? At 15% with no other units that weren't going to be, just to get even, which is a lot of units to be built. And so that's why, I mean, to me, there's two different things. There's getting affordable housing, which is important, and then there's also trying to actually catch up to that 10% mark. And I think it changes, what the goal is. So I was just trying to get a feel for that.
Yeah, this tool isn't really looked at as a way to catch up. It's a way to maintain as you're growing, and add affordable as you're growing. So there would have to be some other method of catching up.
Was there someone else? Yes, Representative? Yeah.
To further address the gentleman's point, it's a piece of a solution. It's kind of a stop loss. But there are other things that I think that we can and should be doing too to increase our affordable housing stock. The example in Woburn, again, they haven't finalized their plan yet, but the expectation is it's going to be about 168 units, and they're going to be carting out 420,000 cubic yards of basically a hill in a very residential neighborhood. Now, there are businesses that are kind of around the corner, but it's single-family home, single-family home, single-family home, and then there's going to be about 500 people living in 168 or so units, single-family home, single-family home, single-family home. To Ms. Sullivan's point about preserving the character of the town, preventing the 40B from coming in, I think is very consistent with preserving the character of the town. There's nothing wrong with affordable housing. 40B units can be beneficial, but it's not something that this town particularly wants because we like to preserve the suburban nature of our community. And having a 40B development come in is, I think, counter to that goal. So again, this is just one piece. An inclusionary zoning bylaw is just one piece to a solution. I would hope that this is something that passes, and I'm glad that this is in draft form, so we can kind of flush out these issues where we disagree, but I do hope that this does pass, so that we can focus on the other pieces to the solution too, so that we can kind of get to that 10% threshold without compromising too much of what Wilmington is.
Yes, I'm going to go to Representative Robertson first, please.
I just wanted to highlight real quick, I couldn't agree more with Mr. Loud's point on proposing the payment in lieu of unit. I find it's a quick and easy way for other municipalities around the area to kind of kick the can down the road, allow developments to collect the money. Now the citizens are already sick of, as Sullivan more eloquently put it than I could, change the character, and now they find an addition where behind the units and there needs to be a development or an expenditure of town fund for an additional unit. It's my personal opinion, I think it'd be better to attack the affordability head on and refuse the options for them to buy out and shirk their duties at the moment, and then kind of pass that onto that responsibility onto the town later to catch up. And I just think, Mr. Loud, you hit it right on the head by saying it's something I'd oppose it to as well.
Is there, just one second, is there anybody else that wishes to speak first before I go back and do a redo? Okay, Ms. Sullivan.
I just want to say, in 2004, the inclusionary bylaw was to prevent 40B from coming here. This isn't going to stop that now. No matter what we do, okay, the inclusionary bylaw is not going to stop a 40B from coming here. We're already vulnerable to it because we didn't do this in 2004. So I don't want to see the town sacrifice its character any more than it has to, because this is only a maintenance. This is designed to be a maintenance. You can't really get that far ahead of the game. And I just wanted to make that point, like, how much do you want to sacrifice for that? And to Mr. Ethan's point, you know, the point is to create affordable units and find a way to do that, but without sacrificing the town at the same time, and our character. And that's why I'm opposed to sacrificing the open space component. I'm totally opposed to that. We should be able to create those units without sacrificing open space and the character of the town. Otherwise, I would be totally opposed to it, because we're still going to be vulnerable to 40B. So I don't want both.
Okay, is that it? Yeah, one last point, we can move on.
Not necessarily tonight, but I think at some future, reasonably near future meetings, what would be interesting is to Mr. Eaton's point that there are other ways to get to our affordable goals and all that. I think it'd be nice if we could have have an agenda item in your meeting to discuss those and find out what other tools are in the town's toolbox.
Okay, we all set up here? Yep.
Just one more quick point. I said this a long time ago, and what Mr. Sawyer said, he hit the nail on the head as well, but I said as well, is that for the state mandate for us to get where we're going, we're gonna have to build like 1,500 units. I said it before, I'd welcome a friendly 40B. Put 100 units wherever you wanna go, we get 100% credit of those apartments, and we'll never have to worry about it ever again. And then maybe implement this program. That's what we're going to do, and we're making baby steps. Go out there, get a developer right now. It's not gonna be a local developer. You're gonna have an Avalon or a Metro. Let's be realistic. Contact them, say, please, build 100 units, we're gonna let you do it. Now we don't have to even worry about a 1,500 unit complex going in to meet that mandate. Then we start this. That would make a lot of sense. That's what I would do. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gingrich, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, we're going to go back to now communications.
So the next item under communication is a memo to the board addressing the North Wilmington Commuter Rail Station. There was a meeting that was hosted by Senator Tarr, our legislative delegation, including Representative Robertson was there. And there was a discussion about the options for addressing the ongoing issue where trains are stopping on Route 62 and blocking emergency vehicles en route to emergencies. one of the things that was of note is the relatively low ridership, clearly low ridership. Was noted that on average, the number of riders going inbound is 57 per day. The number of riders outbound is 85 per day. And I think this colors the MBTA's approach to dealing with this, because clearly with the ridership at those levels, I think there's some trepidation about spending a lot of money on upgrades to the to those that area. But with that being said, a couple of things were being looked at. One is looking at the times during the day, during the middle of the day, when there is very little activity at all at the train station. And as it is right now, every scheduled stop, the train does in fact come to a complete stop, whether there's people looking to onboard or offboard. The thought going forward is to identify perhaps times where there is, according to the statistics, there is minimal to no ridership, and in those cases the train would continue to travel through at a slow rate, but would not make the stop. So it doesn't solve the problem, but it means that the train is impeding travel for a shorter period of time. The other option that's being looked at, so the Federal Transit Administration has criteria that they set out that governs the requirements to make substantial upgrades when a platform is being redesigned. And there may be instances in cases like Wilmington, and I guess there's in other stations where the ridership is lower, that there may be some limited upgrades that can be made without triggering a much more extensive and expensive upgrade to the whole facility to address full compliance with ADA and other requirements that they have. So those are two things that are being looked at this point, and the check-in is mid-February.
Mr. Chairman, can I just
Yes.
make a quick comment if I could? I just want to touch upon this a little bit. And I know you said yourself, Mr. Chairman, that the board has been working on it for over a year, and I know the town manager has done a good job. And we talked about, obviously, the trains that are stopping on Route 62 by Eli's, and it's blocking up traffic. And we know that's an ongoing thing, and it's sad. I saw it even a couple weeks ago. And sometimes we don't hear about these things as often when we see it on Facebook. And I know I made a comment on Facebook to say, no, we should work on it right away. And I know Representative-elect said, no, we're going to work on that. And it was good to, talking to the manager, he did a lot of research work, and he did say, Mike, and I did say on Facebook, on the community page, that I know the other selectmen care. They're going to work on it immediately, start Monday. And I tend to think that's what we all did. And I was kind of glad to see that everyone did show an interest, and the manager said he was working on it, and then he put it in our packet. The only thing, and I say this in a nice and friendly way, it would have been really nice if the invitation was to all of us to this meeting. I say it in a nice, friendly way. We all showed concern. I stated, hey, the entire membership's for the residents. It's not because it's an election year. I'm saying this. I mean, I'm not even up for election, and I want to make sure we all take care of our people. We do that. And I think we're working together collectively, and we're doing a good job. But it would have been really nice if we did get an invite. I know you're the chair. It would have been nice. Maybe some people would go. Maybe some people can't. But at least we had the opportunity. It would have been nice to go there once again to say, hey, we're here as a full board. We want to take care of this because this can't continue to happen, the train stopping. That's all. I say it in a nice way. It would have been nice.
That's a good point, and
That would have been
and you
nice.
did it in a nice way. But we did have a meeting, I think, in July, where the entire board was invited here. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it because that's when I had my knee replacement. But I believe Mr. Loud attended and Mr. Bendel attended. But the board in its entirety was invited to a meeting here with Keolis and a few other key components and individuals. And this particular meeting was, we were invited by Mr. Tarr. It wasn't up to me to invite the entire board. It was Mr. Tarr invited myself, Mr. Hull, Mr. Robertson, the fire chief, the police chief. There were Representative Gordon had a representative there. And I think Mr. Tarr had a couple of his legislative aides as well. So it was an invite, and if I wasn't able to make it, I certainly would have extended that invitation to someone else on the board to represent us. But that's what
I
happened.
understand.
So
And it would have been
it wasn't
fluid.
up to,
No, no,
wasn't
but-
up to
yeah.
me to say, okay, let's all go and get at that meeting.
I'm sure,
because,
and I appreciate
just
that.
so you
And
understand.
I understand. I'm sure
Yeah.
if you called Senator Tyler, the representative, said the other members, let's extend the invitation to them. It would have been nice to get an invite, but that didn't
Maybe so.
happen.
Maybe
That's
so.
invite, so, hey, here and there, maybe in the next meeting, you might want to do it, that's all. All right, and tell Bruce Tyler the same thing, okay? Thank you.
Okay, next, under correspondence, Verizon is providing information about a couple of program changes effective February 4th. They're removing the ESPN Classic channel, and then as of January 8th, the so-called Z Living channel has been restored on 662. Next is board to consider.
Okay.
Under board to
Board to consider.
Board to consider looking for the board's ratification of appointments to the Disabilities Commission. There's two individuals here. Cheryl Slater is the first person, and Brooke Green are two individuals that I'm looking for a vote on.
I'll offer a motion.
Okay, there's a motion by Mr. Bendel,
Second?
seconded by Mr. McCoy. Any discussion on the appointments? All in favor? Unanimous.
Next is looking for a vote and signature from the board members with regard to the collective bargaining agreement with the International Association of Firefighters. We've been in contract discussions since early 2018. The contract expired as of 6/30/2018, and basically the major terms to the agreement would be a COLA of 2.5% retroactive to 7/1/2018, and then effective 7/1/2019, a COLA of 2.75%, and then 7/1/20, it would be 2.75%. There's a number of language clarifications that are included in the contract. One of the things that we obtained was confirmation that leave time, when someone is out on a unpaid leave, that they're considered to be still a member in good standing in terms of an employee, but they're not continuing to accrue personal sick and vacation time. So I think that was important for the town. And then there was an adjustment to their uniform allowance, which went from $700 to $1,000.
Okay, is there a motion to accept?
So moved.
Mr. Loud, seconded by Mr. Bendel. Any other discussion on the contract? All in favor? And that's unanimous.
And so, Mr. Chair, I would suggest that perhaps after the meeting, the board can gather to sign these.
Okay. Sounds good.
Next is a collective bargaining agreement. Similar situation here. This is with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Local 1703, Unit 1. These are the custodial and building maintenance personnel. Again, their contract expired as of 7/1/2018. We've been negotiating with them since earlier in 2018. I would note that it is, while it's preferred to settle these contracts within the contract period, it's not unusual for these contracts to sometimes extend beyond the timeline of the agreement. In this case, the COLAs for the ASME personnel would be 2.5% retro 7/1/18, 2.5% 19 and 2.5% 7/1/2020. Similar to the previous contract, we obtained language indicating that people on unpaid leave would not continue to accrue benefits. Also, other changes included employees have to notify the town at least 72 hours in advance if they're requesting vacation time. And then one of the things that we did was to codify what happens when people are accruing personal time after they've been hired. So there was some confusion about that that led to a grievance, so that's been addressed.
Okay, is there a motion for the contract to accept? Mr. Eaton made the motion. Second by Mr. Loud. Any discussion? All in favor?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay, with one
One
abstention.
abstention. Thank you.
4 in favor, 1 abstention.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it for a board to consider. We're going on to new business. And under new business, seeing as there was unintentional missing of the public comments, we'll take it up under new business because the item not reasonably anticipated can be done at this time by the chairman. So we'll go to public comments. Does anybody wish to speak? I know, Mr. Doucette, you had your hand up first.
Dr. Doucette, 20 Palmer Way. The issue on the train in North Wilmington is a serious issue. Is why it's become a topic lately. And the solution to that would be a nice fire station in North Wilmington. A lot of talk about it, but that would solve a lot of problems.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr.
I get two things, I'll make it quick, I'm sorry.
If you could just introduce yourself.
Rob Fasulo, 28 Marjorie Road. Back in June of 18, Selectman Loud had asked a question that I believe is still unanswered, and I'd like to see if it was clarified. During the interviews for council, we learned that the old council was asked not to attend the ZBA meeting at the beginning of 18. Did we ever find out who in the town had given that order? I don't recall ever hearing it, and I know it was an open question.
Mr. Hull?
I don't have an answer at that. I don't
know if there was anybody on the board. I didn't tell them not to attend.
I'll respond because he did mention my name. We did bring it up, and I was satisfied with talking to most of Hull and Dan Vim, and there was a miscommunication between the two of them on why the former town council wasn't there, but it is a moot point now because the current town council's been at the meetings, so.
Well, I was actually going to ask that. At whose direction was town council at the last ZBA meeting? They just show up on their own, or did somebody here send them? And what materially had changed that at one point they weren't welcome to now being there?
I can say that I think there was a difference of opinion in terms of council previously versus currently as to their participation in these meetings. I think there was some reservations without getting into specifics as to prior council had expressed about participating or attending the ZBA meetings. More recently, there were conversations that I had with Dan Veerman, the chair, and also current council, and the collective consensus was that it would be appropriate to have council at the meetings.
I got one final question for the board members. If the residents had come to you in the future with a request to open an independent investigation as far as some of the decisions that have been made regarding the 362 project, would you accommodate their request and initiate an independent review? See if any rules, bylaws, laws were broken in approving any of the steps that have been taken in the project?
Are you talking about an independent review by the town council? So,
An independent
I mean, the
review
town
would be
council is
not
there to
include-
review
An independent counsel.
anything that's, out of, that's not legal, or, I mean, that's why he's there, to make it those judgments, right?
Would you be receptive to that request by the people?
For town council to do
An
what they're doing now?
independent review, somebody not associated with the town.
I guess I would have to find out exactly, you'd have to give more,
Well, the
of an idea of what
residents
you're
would
talking
come to you
about.
with that. I mean, would you be
Well,
receptive to
I
it?
think I would have to look at it, what they're coming to us with, and then make a determination. I can't just hypothetically say yes to that without seeing what it is.
If
I
we're-
mean, how can anybody do
There's really nothing
that?
to interpret here, it's a straightforward question.
No,
If the
it's
residents
really not a
wanted
straightforward
an
question,
independent person
unfortunately.
to look at the decisions that have been made regarding that project, would you
And
initiate?
we
it?
have town council that is here to advise
will
us
not?
in that, no.
I assume that
I
that's
didn't
what
say
you're
we would not. What I said is that we would have to review what is brought forward to us. How can you make a blanket comment and say, yes, we'll do it, or no, we won't, until we see what it is? I mean, you want to,
Answers noted, thank you.
I'll just say real quick, if I could, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if he was asking all the members. I'd
Uh-huh.
say this, doesn't matter if it's 362 Middlesex Ave or anything, if folks thought there was some questions and they wanted to have an independent counsel to investigate it, to look into a matter that it was warranted in any realm in the town, I would look favorable of something like that. If it was warranted, no matter what the subject matter is, as the community as a whole. That's all. If people felt a certain way, that's
And
it.
that's-
I'm
and
not
that's-
pinpointing that on 362 and make that clear. Anything in general in the community.
and the
That's
key
all.
is if it was warranted, and that's what I'm saying. You have to look at it first, and if it is warranted, we would move on it. Simple as that. But you can't just say it without knowing what it is. Yes.
I have a question regarding.
If you could just state
Michael
your
Shea,
name and-
31 Park Street. I had a question that I wasn't able to ask at the Board of Appeals meeting that I thought was quite important to the people of the town, which is that they're doing a traffic survey. We all know traffic survey, not gonna put more traffic than Dunkin' Donuts is, so I didn't see the point in that, but I would like to know how a citizen, such as myself, would go about making a request for a report on the number of discarded needles and drug paraphernalia between the area of, say, where Salem Street comes out onto, or even 93, where 93 comes out onto 62 there, and say the Whitfield School, that small area between 93 and the Whitfield School. The police must have a log or a record of how many discarded needles or paraphernalia that they have found or picked up, say over the past 5 years, 3 years, to get a baseline so that we know if that number is, say, 10 a year or 20 a year, and it suddenly, no pun intended, spikes up to 200, I think that would be an obvious sign that what ends up going there would have been the cause of that. I mean, I participated in cleaning up Lover's Brook when I was younger, and I think about the prime spot if you're on your way, or the prime spot to discard needles would be Lover's Brook. And how would a citizen Is it a FOIA request? How, I mean, there are records of this that I would like to know the answer to. I would like to know how many discarded needles and paraphernalia are found on a yearly basis in that general vicinity.
Mr. Hull?
I'm told that you made this request of the police chief, and he had a conversation with you and related that the IMC system, which is the IT system that all of the police reports put in, they don't track, the reports don't track by needle disposition. That the challenge that they have is, as you probably know, they get thousands of requests every year for service, and there are various codes that are put in by the police officers that are reporting, and to because there isn't a code apparently for needle disposition, it amounts to physically going through however many thousands of reports there have been over the 3 to 5 year period. So as I understand it, you know, I mean, that's really the challenge, is that there is not a system, there is not a way to just go into the computer system and, you know, plug in the word needles and identify the number of instances where police responded to a situation where needles had to be picked up. You know, it's not that we aren't willing to provide the information. It's just it's very difficult to retrieve that.
You had another question?
No, in a follow-up to that, what he said was that it was noted in the log, but you would have to physically look it up. And he said that if I wanted to, I could do that, or if I wanted to receive the information from them, that I would have to pay for it, and I couldn't afford that, the amount of money that it would cost. I think that the town can, or I think that at least the town should look into that, because I think that that is a much more important thing to know than the number of cars that are going to be coming out of that parking lot. And I don't know what the cost was for that traffic survey, but to look through a logbook for the past, I asked the chief for 10 years. You know, you don't need that number. Say 1 or 3 or 5. Pick a number. But to know that number now, if that number is only 10 or 20, I don't know what the number would be, but if that number changes significantly, the people that are responsible for it should bear the burden of the consequences of what those extra needles or paraphernalia or whatnot. I think that the town would be well served in knowing that it's only a specific number right now in the event that this should go forward. And in regards to that, the only other thing was, we just had in my neighborhood a fentanyl situation where the police called the state police to call for a dog to come and chase some perpetrators through Allgrove Estates and behind Marsha Road. And the state police denied the request, according to what I was told, denied the request for the dog because they won't allow the dog to search for that. And they were eventually able to get a dog, I think, from Melrose. And my question is, do we have any intentions of getting another police dog? And would we subject them to that same situation? So I don't know if you can answer the latter, but do we have any intentions of replacing the police dog that we used to have?
I would say not in the immediate future. We have some staffing issues that we need to deal with in terms of bringing up to full staff. That really becomes issue number one before we can start assigning specialists. With regard to whether a dog in that circumstance would be allowed to pursue that, that's a question I would have to defer to the chief. I can't answer that.
Okay.
So,
Well, I didn't get an answer to the first part of that, which is,
Not immediately. I don't foresee us obtaining a police dog in the near term. No.
regarding how does a citizen make the request, or is it,
you can
the
make a
chief
public
indicated
records
to me that
request, is what
it
you-
is there in the logbook, but to research it would cost too much money. And that was the answer that I got. So I'm coming before the board here to ask, what would it take to look through the log for the past years? I don't think it's 1,000 or whatever it is, but what would it take for someone to look through the log to get that number? And does the board consider it to be a worthwhile endeavor?
You could make a public records request in
I
that
believe that I
regard.
already did that,
Okay.
and it was denied because of cost.
Joe, do we have the
Well-
capability, I'm sorry,
Yep.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry to
No,
interrupt
no.
you. Oh, do we have the capability to go back 1 year relative to this request? I mean, I don't know what it's going to cost the town, but don't we have that capability of taking a look at the record the past year and coming up with a number?
I don't want to speak specifically for the chief. If there is a public request, I don't know how, at the end of my understanding from the conversation I had with the chief was that based upon his conversation with you, he provided you a response and that you were satisfied. If you're now suggesting that you are continuing to make a public records request, I think you need to make that specifically to the chief, and we will certainly comply with the law. Again, it's going to take some time. This is not something that, is just easily done. So, someone at the police department will have to go through physically, from what I understand, some number of police reports over the course of whatever period of time you're requesting, and physically try to identify on each report if there's any reference in that report to needles. That's how it works, because the computer system is set up so that there are certain tags that they can go in to identify information, but I'm told that needles is not one of the codes that is in the system. So, if there's, I don't know how many records there would be, whether there's 3,500 records over the course of a 1-year period or whatever that number is, someone will physically have to look at each one of those records to see if there's any reference to needles.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Sullivan?
Yeah, just to build a little bit on what Mr. Fasulo was saying about an independent inquiry about how the town has handled 362 Middlesex, because I'd like to daylight one issue. I've done some public information requests, and I felt like maybe I got what I had asked for, but now that there's some public information requests that Mr. Fasulo has asked for that have been appealed to the Secretary of State's office, and the Secretary of State's office has basically told the town they have to comply with that request. And then in responses back to the Secretary of State's office, they still haven't replied with the request. And I'm bringing it to this board's attention because I think that the buck stops here. That's public information, and it's our information, and the clerk's office is just the keeper of that information. And when there's an information request that's made, that's supposed to be made available to the public. Now, there seems to be some information that's being called attorney-client privilege, and I guess that's why maybe we wouldn't really want the town attorney to do an independent review of how things have been handled at 362 Middlesex. Right now, the town has had 10 days to comply with the Secretary of State's office. because they've made the request to see those records that the town's claiming attorney-client privilege, which they haven't adequately said that it is attorney-client privilege, because the burden is on the town to prove that it's attorney-client privilege, which the town has not done.
I can't speak to the specifics. I know Sharon George, the town clerk, has indicated there's been multiple requests on a regular basis now for various public records. My understanding is that she has responded in a timely manner. There have been some instances where it appears they may be attorney-client governed, and I don't think it's inappropriate to, in those cases, be careful before records are released. So I'll have to go back and speak with her about where the various records requests stand. I know there were some that were made, the request was made, and the expectation was that the record was going to be made available the next day or the day after that. That, you know, there's other things going on in the course of the day, and we can't always respond, you know, that day or even the day after. So I'll have to go back and look at the specific requests and where they stand. I think there was something that I saw today that she was dealing with town council on. It might have been this request that might have been a turn.
It really has been a long time since this request is made, and Rob can tell you what the date is. I don't have the date off the top of my head, but what I can say is that if something is attorney-client privilege, it's her burden to show exactly why it's attorney-client privilege, which she did not do, and the Secretary of State office agreed she did not do. The Secretary of State office told her that this is what she had to comply with. She had 10 days to do it. Within that 10-day period, she did not comply with that. It's pretty simple. The burden is on the town to produce why is attorney-client privilege. The town did not do that. So now it's been appealed once again to the Secretary of State's office.
Mischaracterizing the situation that somehow the town is being nefarious here, which I know there's a desire to do that, but I think I need to look at the specifics of, there's more than one request that has been made, and I think they have been responded to in a timely manner.
Just to let you know what the request was, can I just say what the request was, please? All it was just to any and all correspondence that had to do with the building inspector and any recommendations and interdepartment memos that the building inspector had with, the building department had with the planning board. Because we wanted to know, you know, what recommendations and what the building department had to say about, you know, the ZBA to the building inspector, the planning board to the building inspector, whatever the case may be. It wasn't a huge request, and there was like 10 emails of correspondence that we are not being made available, that somehow is attorney-client privilege. And if it is attorney-client privilege, okay, but the burden is on the town to prove that it's attorney-client privilege, and the town has not done that, and it's been at least a month.
Okay, but that point well taken. We'll have the town manager look into it, and he'll respond in kind, right? He'll respond to you and to the person who put in that request. Yeah.
I'm sure the town, just to reiterate, I'm sure the town manager's gonna do that. I mean, obviously, you say the buck stops here, we are the Board of Selectmen, so I would hope to think that we do get some of these answers. If the secretary, and I'm just hearing this for the first time, is making like a second request to get the information, is that what you're saying?
There's been 3.
From the Secretary of State's office?
Yeah, that's about it. It's been appealed,
All right,
it's been
I'm not
appealed
even
twice. The
privy to that.
Secretary of State's office made the request to the town.
Well, yeah, I too am not privy to that.
I'm not privy
I
to
don't
it,
know
but if that
any of
is the
board
case,
members
then
are,
we need to do
because
our job.
It
plain and
goes through a
simple.
certain protocol
All right, thank
through the,
All right.
through the public records request to the town clerk, and then they act upon it. I wasn't aware that it went to the Secretary of State's office either. Let me take someone who hasn't spoken on the public comments first. Sure, go ahead.
So you asked what the nature would be. We as residents, I can name one bylaw that was violated right off the top of my head with regards to 362 Middlesex. I want to see where the building inspector or building department stands in that manner. And how does a memo between 2 secretaries be considered attorney-client privilege?
Yeah.
That makes absolutely no sense there's plenty of darkness on this project with this town. All we're trying to do is shed a little bit of light how an illegal building plan goes forward through the planning board. How does this happen in Wilmington? It seems like our town is acting in the best interest of the developer and is throwing the residents out, but with the bathwater. And when we try to figure out how is this happening, you guys tell the state to go pound sand. That's what's happened. I've got the notices of determination. I'll be happy to show the media. I'm not making this stuff up. 10 emails, most of which didn't even originate or go to an attorney. How does that happen? I always expected attorney-client, I mean, you're an attorney, Jonathan. How do you have attorney-client privilege with 2 secretaries? How's that happen? Transparency. We had a resident sit in front of you guys a couple of meetings ago talking about transparency, and everybody was for it. Now, this is what your town is doing. This is what I mean, this isn't the way we act here. I gotta go to the Secretary of State and they order you to comply, and then you say, forget it, I'm gonna do what I want?
Well, as we said, we're just hearing some of this for the very first time, or all of this. I know that there's been
So
public
now
records
knowing that,
requests.
would you be
So I've
entertaining?
directed the town manager to move forward and to find out what the issue is so that he can get back to the person who put in the public records request. Yes, Mr. Reed?
Just because my name was mentioned, Mr. Pizzillo, this is the first time I've heard of this issue. And I'm not going to get into the various scenarios where that might fall within attorney-client privilege, because it's not a good use of anybody's time, and if we could be here till 2 o'clock in the morning, and nobody wants that. But now that the 5 members of the Board of Selectmen know about this, we all want to know the answer too. So we have another meeting in 2 weeks, and I expect at that point we'll have an update, and hopefully to everybody's satisfaction, and the records that you requested, if not properly within the scope of attorney-client privilege, have been provided in a timely manner. Okay?
Is there someone, Mr. Burns, did you have a comment? Mr. West, I saw your hand.
Yes,
All
thank
set.
you. Again, Frank West, 2 Birchwood Road. I wonder, we have annual town meeting coming up, and I know we've talked about the potential of moving the town meeting date as far as, making it maybe a couple of meetings or whatever, maybe like a Friday night and a Saturday or whatever. And I get two questions on that. One, is there going to be any discussion on that at the upcoming town meeting? That's my first question. Or is that still kind of, we're in the thought process of possibly moving things around or not?
Not as far as I know. I don't know that we had a memo that came from the town manager regarding the survey that you took, and it wasn't really a large amount of people that participated in it. It didn't seem to be leaning one way or the other. It wasn't really saying, let's do it on a weekday or let's do it on a Saturday. So there's nothing that I intend to bring up.
And I know currently, the Finance Committee and the Planning Board typically gives recommendations on articles, even if the article really has nothing to do with one or the other committee. Sometimes you got something that has nothing to do with money, but the Finance Committee is one of the, gives a formal recommendation. And what I was wondering was, has there been any talk of the Board of Selectmen, who are our elected officials, giving recommendations on town meeting articles prior to the town meeting?
I don't think we've talked
So I know that the Finance
about
Committee-
that.
I apologize, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I know that the Finance Committee recommendations are required by our bylaws. There is no similar requirement to the Board of Selectmen. Usually, people that are up here, they speak their mind, at least on the ones that are generating the most conversation. I wouldn't be opposed to it, but
I just offer that up because, I mean, you five are our elected officials. Everybody else, be it the planning board or the finance committee, are appointed officials. So if we have, recommendations from the Board of Selectmen on certain articles, it gives a little bit more insight, in some cases, to the individuals on the board, and also the mentality of which way the board is leaning towards maybe certain directions within the town.
aside from being the boring person that reads the article at town meeting, we're all the same as everybody that comes there, because we're just one vote, and town meeting is the governing body of the town, not the Board of Selectmen. And it's important to remember that. So I mean, I have no problem giving my opinions on any article that comes up, but at the same time, I do want to respect the fact that the people that show up to vote at town meeting are the ones that are really deciding the direction. I don't want to disrupt that or even present the, or come across with the image that the Board of Selectmen is really making a decision on everything, because it's not how the town is designed.
And the members do have an opportunity to speak in favor of it or opposed to it at town meeting. So they'll give their opinion, and they will stand at the vote.
Yeah. No, but what I'm saying, Mr. Chairman, is, as an example, I know when I was on the board, we were asked specifically, for example, when the library came up, we had, we as a board gave a recommendation towards, whether we wanted or not wanted as a board to support that decision. So I didn't know if the Board of Selectmen, being our elected officials, had ever given any thought to, weighing in and giving either support or non-support on town meeting articles. As a board, as opposed to.
I think we do that as an individual,
Don't we do that when we do vote to have the articles put onto the ballot? If we had issue with one, we would probably bring it up at that point and not vote for it to be on the ballot, the warrant at that point. So there is a measure of support or not supporting a particular article.
Yes.
Just one quick point, not to be, just to answer one of the questions that Frank asked. I was appointed by the members of the Board of Selectmen to be on the Inhabitants Bylaw Committee, and I know we made recommendations, and I don't expect the manager to have that with them, but there was a survey, and I think some, according to the survey, may have liked a couple of weeknights, some to the survey may have liked a Saturday. I'm just asking you through, Mr. Chairman, to the town manager, why don't we call a special Inhabitants Bylaw meeting next week with the town clerk, the members who got appointed, Valerie Gibbons can be there, and you, Mr. Town Manager, and maybe come up with a day that it's a compromise to everybody, that way we could go forward. And I get it, you do have to prepare a budget, and I understand that, so maybe if we could have a special Inhabitants Bylaw meeting, maybe sometime next week, I'm happy to attend with the members that were appointed by the members of this Board of Selectmen. I think Valerie's a member of it, and we had Officer, Deputy Chief Richter, but somebody else would have to be there, and the town clerk was there. She's still the clerk, right? Because I know she's retired soon.
Yes.
So maybe if we could maybe have an emergency meeting next week, and maybe with you there, obviously I know you're busy with the budget and everything, and maybe come up with a day and say, all right, this is what we're gonna do, and bring it to this town meeting and see if we can get a yay or nay on it and get it done, because that was one of the goals. Thank you.
Anyone? Yes, sir.
Sawyer, 58 Lawrence Street. So I guess to Mr. Fasulo's point, it sounds like if there was a town council opinion that we sort of wanted to get a second opinion on, and I know that there are a few things that you said that you were going to look into as the board, so maybe you would have some questions too, but just to kind of put it into layman's terms, for me, you go to a doctor, they give an opinion, if you go get a second opinion, it sounds like we could do the same thing with town council if there was some issue that we thought we needed confirmation or maybe a second opinion on. Is that accurate?
Second opinion from another independent law
From
firm?
another,
I don't know if we can do that or not. I don't know what that would entail, and
Well, certainly the board can, I suppose the board can hire special counsel. I think the question is, what is the scope, what is the scope of service? What are you
and if we did that,
looking
we'd
for?
have to go through the whole process of sending out an RFP, and that could take
Well,
several.
it depends
You
on
know,
the scope
yeah.
of the, I think there needs to be some definition as to what is this investigation, what specifically is being investigated.
Yeah, I think let's look at the public records request, and let's take one step at a time and see if we can get that answered. I think that seems to be the issue at this point in time, and
Yeah, I mean,
we'll get it there.
Well, I mean, part of it is just that, just to know sort of what the possibilities are, because there's, a month in between meetings, and just if the, as the citizens, we have to maybe put together a request to do something like that. I mean, it all takes time, so I'm just trying to figure out if that's something that's possible or not. But it sounds like it is possible. It just depends on what the specifics are that we'd be looking at to have a sort of a second opinion on, theoretically.
Yeah, I mean, like with the doctor, you have to tell the doctor what is the opinion you're asking for. You just can't say, give me a second opinion on what. So the question is on what?
It would be specific, yeah. Okay.
Okay, is there anything else? Okay. Yes, just one more question, as long as it's not on what you talked about before, because we talked
Well,
about that for
I didn't
over 5 minutes.
I didn't understand the answer, which is, I made the request. The manager said that the chief said that I was satisfied with the request, and I wasn't satisfied with it. That's the answer that he gave me, and that's why I came here tonight, because I wanted to know what a FOIA request entitles citizens to. Is it just something that can be pushed, a button pushed and the answer received from a computer, or can the log be looked at by someone because I make that request, is my question. And
Okay, thank you. Yes,
I
I
didn't get an answer. I didn't
hang
get
on,
an answer.
Mr. Burns is going to clarify it, hopefully.
It's probably put into the computer system under a found property, along with every other item of found property in the town. Yeah, that would be my guess. That's the way our system works. So you'd have to go through each individual found property, which is probably what the chief was talking about. That would take time. To go through every single entry into the computer system under found property and see if it was a needle, or if it was a suitcase, or if it was a puppy, you know what I mean?
And
That
that's
may
not
be-
covered under a freedom of information.
Yeah, it would be, yeah.
request?
You could request it, sure.
Well,
But, yeah,
I made,
thank-
I made that request.
Like
Thank
Mr. Hall was saying, it will take some time, I'm sure, to go through each one, each entry. I would make requests, sure.
I've already made it
Okay,
once.
thank you. We're going to move on now to new business. And does anyone wish to speak on new business? Yes, Mr. Loud.
Mr. Chairman, at this time every night I get the opportunity to
Can I have it quiet?
talk, a shout out to a veteran. A veteran tonight, the veteran tonight I'd like to shout out to is John Wallace. He's a U.S. Navy Vietnam vet. He volunteers at the Senior Center and Boy Scouts, and he helps many different organizations throughout the community. And also, at this time, in front of this microphone, I've called our fire chief a different name, and I need to apologize. His name is Chief McMahon, not the other name. I've been calling him a couple of times. He's called me out on it. We joke about it now, but I do want to publicly apologize to Chief McMahon for calling him a different last name. It's a slightly different version of McMahon, but he's a great guy, and we're having fun with it, but I just wanted to publicly apologize. So thank you.
Street name, what's that? Mr.
Just real
McCoy?
quick, talking about the fire department, I wanted to wait until new business, because I know you had folks here, and you're doing a good job getting through the process. I just want to say, I'm really glad that we put the contract behind us. I think the firefighters do a great job. We did take care of the police department. I'm glad to see that. I think that we did take care of our firefighters, the men and women on the front line. They do an outstanding job, and I'm glad they're deserving what they get. They work hard, and they put all their lives on the line every single day. And they helped one of our members on the board. I'm glad he's here. Thank you. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you. Mr. Bendel, all set? Okay, everybody's all set up here? Okay, I would entertain a motion to enter an executive session for the purpose of discussing the purchase, exchange, lease, or other acquisition of real property at 64 Wildwood Street in accordance with Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A6. as an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the town, and further, that upon the conclusion of the executive session, the board will adjourn the meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Eaton,
Second.
second by Mr. Bendel. Any discussion? All in favor? And we'll do a roll call, yes. Thank you.
Yes.
McCoy, yes.
Yes.
Mr. Eaton, yes.
Yes.
Mr. Lau, yes. I am a yes. Thank you.